Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Yountville Town Council meeting for Tuesday, August 4th, 2015. I'm going ahead and calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting. The council did meet prior to this in a special meeting to hold interviews for openings on our Napa County Measure A Finance Oversight Committee and our Zoning and Design Review Board interviews. So if we could please have a roll call for our regular meeting.
Councilmember Moeller. Here. Councilmember Durham.
Here.
Councilmember Dornbecker.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hall.
Here.
Mayor Dunbar.
Here. And I've invited the Veterans Home Administrator, Don Viverka, to please join us and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of our agenda. I don't believe we have any changes.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, a second
I'll second.
by Vice Mayor Hall. And we're just waiting for it. Here we go. We're off and running with our e-voting. And there we go. We all agree to continue the meeting.
That's a good start.
I was sure there was going to be some dissension on that, but we get to start off with some special recognitions tonight. And I'd like to start, first of all, with members of our Zoning and Design Review Board. We have one in particular, Mr. Jason Janes, who has been serving on that board for many, many years. I see that Jason has joined us in the audience. So, Jason, if you would please join me up at the podium, I'd like to present you with this couple tokens of our appreciation.
Don't forget the wine.
Be delighted. Thanks, John.
You know, this is how we do things in Yountville. So.
Red wine is a food group, John.
That's right. I think it's a vegetable. So I'm going to hopefully not break this. So I'd also like to present this certificate of appreciation in recognition of your Zoning and Design Review Board membership. The Town Council and staff express a sincere thank you for your contributions and service to the town of Yountville as a member of the Zoning and Design Review Board between March 2007 and July 2015. And I know for a good portion of that time you were also chairing that board, so thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure.
Actually, I want to take a quick photo.
Okay.
Samantha's our official photographer. There you go.
What I would like to do is to present the town with a gift as it prepares to celebrate its 50th anniversary. Here is a memento from its 25th anniversary.
Wow, February 4th, 1965 incorporation. And this is a date stamp, September 30, 1990.
Wow.
And it was back when a stamp was 25 cents.
It was indeed.
And a special celebrating 25 years of incorporation stamp. Let me show that to the audience. This is very nice.
Wow.
We need another photo.
Yes.
That's neat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the wine. I've enjoyed my term on the board, and I hope in my small way I've contributed to the betterment of the town. Good night.
And if any of you have ever witnessed Mr. Janes on the ZDRB, you would know he is a man of great elegance and also quite the wordsmith. So, you know, your service to the community has really made a huge impact, and thank you very much for your many, many years of service. And I know you're not totally, you know, clear of us yet. We're going to continue to get you to volunteer one thing or another. So thank you. There's somebody much closer to me tonight that we
Now I'm
don't.
going to pale in comparison to that. I didn't bring anything. So
You better think of something. Check the drawer real quick.
I've got candy.
Oh, you've got a caramel. There you go. Councilmember Durham also has served a number of years on the ZDRB, and if you would, please, let's go down to the podium. No, put that back. You have to. Now, again, also in recognition of your many years of service on the ZDRB. You also have here a certificate of appreciation. The town council and staff express a sincere thank you for your contributions and service to the town of Yountville as a member of the Zoning and Design Review Board between July 2010 and July 2015. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there you go. See, if you come to our meetings more often, we give away things all the time. It only takes 5 to 10 years of your time to earn it, though. I also want to recognize, I don't see Jason in the audience, and you did not have to be called Jason to be on the ZDRB, but it did improve your chances for a few years there. But Jason Scoggins, also a dedicated member of our community, served on the ZDRB between June 2012 and July of 2015. We'd like to recognize his years of service to our community also. And now I'd like to invite Sandra Fagan to the podium. I bet you know what's going to happen. And just so people understand, these are specially engraved bottles from the town of Yountville with the town logo and a little special message. We didn't just go down to Ranch Market and pick something up, but I'd like to present you that so you can celebrate your time committed to Yountville. We always do things with wine.
In open space.
And open space, exactly.
Good answer.
This is a certificate of appreciation in recognition of your commitment to serving the town of Yountville on the Napa County Regional Parks and Open Space District Advisory Committee. We appreciate the town council and staff express a sincere thank you for your contributions and service to the town of Yountville as a member of that advisory committee between August 2014 and June 2015. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you.
If you'd like to share any thoughts?
Just, I want to thank you for the opportunity to represent the town of Yountville to this committee. It was very important to be able to recommend to the Napa County Regional Parks and Open Space District Board things that they may do in the coming years, perhaps to not just sustain the work they're doing, but be able to create additional open space and figure a way to maintain that. And the operations and all that sort of thing. So we had a great time, and I was pleased that we were able to talk about the town of Yountville and its location and the surrounding open space to preserve that for us and for those that might come after us to the town. So I appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your dedication. Also, one other member of our volunteer community cannot be with us tonight, but I do want to recognize Christy Shepard for her service to the Yountville Arts Commission. She served on the commission from April 2013 until July of 2015. She was also the executive director of the Napa Valley Museum until very recently. She's been commuting from Sonoma for many, many years. She has reduced her drive time significantly. Now she's working for a marketing firm that's based over in Santa Rosa. We'll still see her regularly because that happens to be the marketing company that works with our Chamber of Commerce. But I want to especially recognize Christy for her efforts, not only to integrate the museum into the Yountville community experience, but also her service on the Yountville Arts Commission. So thanks to Christy. So that takes care of the really fun part of our evening. The rest of it's going to be reasonably fun, too. But no more wine giveaways, I don't anticipate. Right now, we'd move to our public comment portion of our agenda. We will be having public comment on the agendized items later this evening, but if there's anything that a member of the public would like to bring and address the council that's not on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to do that. Anyone have any outside interest they want to share? Seeing none, we'll move right ahead. We have a consent calendar of, 5 items, including our minutes from July 21st. Is there action to be had on our consent calendar?
I'll
Thank you,
make a
Jason.
motion.
Jason and family, thank you.
I'll second the consent calendar.
So a motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, seconded by the Vice Mayor to approve the consent calendar as presented. Please cast your ballots. That it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our first presentation this evening and get our quarterly report from our Sheriff's Department. Welcome, Sergeant.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Here tonight to present the second quarter report, April, May, and June for 2015. I know you have a full calendar, so I'll try and keep it short. There were no significant law enforcement problems associated with any of the events in the town this quarter. All of the bicycling events in the spring all started off safely. Everything went well. As for the crime trends in town, total number of calls for service continued its upward trend. Number of calls increased by 14.6% over the same time period last year, and has increased by more than 62% over the last 5 years. However, the number of reported crimes and arrests are both lower this year, indicating that there's actually less crime occurring in town. The increase in calls for service is due to increased self-initiated activity by the officers. And I think, like I've mentioned before, I think some of that increase is also due to the medical calls that come through our dispatch for Vets Home. Self-initiated activity increased by over 73% from 396 events last year to 686 this year. There have been no homicides, no rapes, or robberies this year. There was a slight increase in simple assaults. A review of the assaults this quarter showed that there was no particular pattern to the increase. 2 of them were elderly vets. One was a couple that was driving by on Highway 29. One was between restaurant workers, and one involved intoxicated people in a broken bottle. Crimes against property continued a general decline, with 20 reported this year compared to 24 last year and 34 the year before that. So those continue to decline. Number of arrests this year is lower, with 11 compared to 18 last year. The 4 arrests this quarter were 2 for alcohol intoxication and 2 for assaults. Calls for service at the Veterans Home accounted for 16.7% of all the calls for service this quarter. As for traffic enforcement and collisions, the total number of citations issued increased from 348 last year to 381 this year. Parking citations actually decreased slightly, but traffic citations were increased substantially, leading to the higher total. Despite the higher numbers, our amount of education versus enforcement this quarter remained good. Warnings were issued 71% of the time for the 98 traffic stops that were made. I'm happy to report that there were no traffic collisions reported in town this quarter, so maybe the larger stop signs are working. As for vehicle abatements, there were 5. 3 of them were towed, and 2 gained compliance with letters. On a closer look, I keep asking about the French Laundry, and the only thing I've heard is that the wine's back on the shelf and there haven't been any arrests yet. So that concludes it, unless there are any questions.
I did see there was one SUV versus Boulder incident in the Whistle Stop parking lot again. That's 2 this year.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because as far as the statistics go, not all traffic accidents are required to be reported. So even though there may be minor fender benders and things that occur in town, they may not reflect in the stats because the parties are only required to exchange information. So it depends on the severity of the crash, where it happens, and if there's any other crimes involved as to whether it actually shows up as a reported accident.
It makes for an interesting photo to see the SUV propped up on a 45-degree angle on a boulder. But, any questions of the quarterly report? No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we do have our special guest tonight, Don Baverka, administrator of our Veterans Home, to give us an update of the Veterans Home. Welcome.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. It's always good to be here, even though we fly flags. On to more serious things, I'm glad that Fiat identified the best part of the town and is filming their commercial as we speak on the beautiful tree entrance to the Veterans Home. So,
That's why I saw you driving a new vehicle when you came down here.
sure. And no, I just wanted to say that I think some very good things are happening at the home right now. We continue to see an increase in our overall census. We were successful finally in hiring an RN nurse practitioner who will head up our entire expedited new admissions process to the home. When I first came to the home, as I've shared with the council before, it took typically about 8 months to find your way into the program. With our emphasis of changing that and focusing entirely on finding veterans who really ultimately need to be there, we've gotten the admissions process down to as little as 2 hours. And certainly this RN will be a huge addition to helping us perfect and streamline that entire intake process. And of course, that is consistent with what we're seeing promulgated new rules coming out of the United States Department of Veteran Affairs, where they're going to be focusing largely on need versus kind of the country club retirement concept. So they're going to be a little bit more careful moving forward as to who they're willing to pay a per diem for, and they want us to make sure that we're focusing on those who truly need the services that we're capable of providing. So as we watch the continuum of care change in this country, the United States Department of Veteran Affairs is catching up with that, so we're going to see some emphasis changed in terms of how we conduct the business at the Veterans Home. I don't see that changing a lot, other than certainly making sure that we begin to address the needs of future veterans as they start showing up at our doorstep. That means that we're going to be seeing a lot more PTSD. We're going to start seeing a lot more behavioral health challenges in terms of areas particularly involving self-treatment, which involves typically addiction. And we've already begun to work a program with a 63% success rate. Our transitions program is really not even a formally recognized program, but it's doing a great job of taking individuals who typically have come out of the Vietnam era of service, who have gone undiagnosed and thus untreated, and have chosen self-medication avenues. We're helping them to be successful and integrating into our program or back out into successful living in the community. So that continues to be our emphasis. With that in mind, I have achieved successful approval from the governor's office to assist the Pathway Home Board with finding reimbursement methodologies to help that program sustain and be stronger and be better as we move forward. I see that as an integral part of the success of the home and stepping up and treating, again, the latest group of veterans who desperately need our help. Sometimes I've been asked, well, what's the difference between the World War II guys and the veterans today? According to the specialists within the United States Department of Veteran Affairs, they have given me numbers that typically 45 days of direct combat exposure in World War II versus 1,000 today. So the collateral damages of war and the moral damages of war that we're subjecting our current warriors to is significant, and I believe that it's our responsibility to step up and help them be successful as they reintegrate back into our society. So that's what the home is about. That's part of what our future should be about. I'm proud to be there as the servant leader, helping redefine a program that I think is going to sustain that home for the next 131 years. I recently offered testimony before the Little Hoover Commission. That was in Sacramento last week, and part of our challenge going forward is making sure that we have appropriate budgets and appropriate resources to make sure that we're not burning our staff out by requiring mandatory overtime. We're looking for ways of reducing that Our workforce is typically aging, just like everything else in our society these days, and we need to find ways to protect our staff, help them be successful, keep them healthy, and I believe having appropriate budgetary structures in place to allow us to hire the manpower and have adequate numbers in order to achieve the kinds of outcomes that our increasing acuity requires. So we're doing our best to properly represent not only the veterans that we serve, but certainly those who serve those veterans, and we can't do it without a comprehensive group of great people and trying to support those who are already there. We have some of the best staff that I've had the privilege of working with in my numerous years in the field and in this career, and I have to kind of step back on my heels a little bit and realize that this town is celebrating its 50th year of development and growth, and that means that I must be looking at a 50-year class reunion, and it's amazing how quickly time flies. But if we stay focused, tomorrow can be better than what it was today. And that's what we're trying to achieve at the Veterans Home. As I speak, we are being surveyed by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. That typically happens on a yearly basis. We are the most heavily surveyed or regulated industry in the nation today. We're surveyed not only by USDVA, but Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, California Department of Public Health, and Department of Health and Social Services. So if anybody questions what we're doing over there, we have many battalions of surveyors who come in and validate our work on a routine basis, and we're proud of our outcomes. I'm hoping that next year the development and growth of our teams, of our staff, our outcomes will be reflected in at least a 4-star property with CMS. We're 3 stars now, came up from 2. Next year we should be a 4, and the year after that we should be a full 5-year, or rather a 5-star property. It does take a few years to kind of scrub off some of your history, but we are well on our way of showing that there's proof in the pudding and of everything we're trying to accomplish and better serve the veterans of this community and certainly the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions of Mr. Averka? No, thank you very much for all the work you're doing up there. You can tell Don is passionate about caring for the veterans. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, before we go on to our first public hearing, I do want to introduce, we do have an assistant town attorney with us tonight, John DeChristina. I just wanted to recognize John here tonight before we get into our public hearings, just in case we start to hear from you.
Yes, good evening.
So thank you for being here. Of course. With that, I'm going to move on to our first public hearing, which is a use permit for Chiarillo Family Vineyards, and I know the Vice Mayor and I have disclaimers that we need to address before we get into that public hearing.
Yes, thank you. In the past, I've consulted our town attorney and been advised that while discussion on wine tasting room regulations within the town of Yountville will have no direct impact upon the operations of my employer, Cliff Lady Vineyards, to the extent there may be indirect impacts upon my employer, these economic impacts are not significant enough under the regulations of the FPPC to result in my disqualification. At this time, I'd like to participate, but I'm required to disclose I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Cliff Lady Vineyards.
Thank you. And I also have a statement. The Fair Political Practices Committee prohibits public officials from participating or influencing decisions in which one has a foreseeable material financial interest that is meaningfully different from that of the general public. Such a conflict would compel that official to recuse oneself from consideration of an application. To provide transparency related to this wine business permit application, my wife, Robin, is employed by the Good Life Wine Collective, a wine group that owns 3 wine businesses, including Jessup Cellars, which has a tasting room at the north end of Yountville. Her position in industry outreach and marketing, meaning she contacts industry partners like lodging concierges, car services, restaurants, and other businesses involved in the wine industry to attract visitors to the Good Life Wine Collective. After receiving legal advice from our town attorney, I have determined I have no reasonably foreseeable expectation of a material financial benefit or interest related to my wife's employment. Her job has no bearing on my consideration of this application. Therefore, I will participate in this permit application request. I'm sure you would not guess that was confirmed by legal counsel, the language that I used. But with that, I will go ahead and offer up our staff report. Nathan, please.
Great. Good evening, council. Before you this evening, you can see that the applicant, Chiarello Family Vineyards, is seeking a use permit for the currently vacant Suite 2 in V Marketplace, located at 6525 Washington Street. The proposal is to use the space as a tasting room that features furniture, decor, and merchandise that is available for purchase. There will be approximately 6 different types of wine available for tasting and purchase, as well as a variety of unique retail. The retail includes pottery, cookbooks, chairs, vineyard and grape vine decor, vintage kitchen products, bistro trays, among others. The space, previously known as Saluna, in Suite 2, is approximately 465 square feet. Suite also has 2 distinct areas. The first, about 315 square feet, will host the tastings. In that space, there will be a salon table and chairs in the space that will be available for purchase. The space will also contain the wine and glass displays. In the other dedicated space in the suite, it will be dedicated to culinary antiques and vintage kitchen products. Space will also have bookshelves that will display various cookbooks for sale. It's proposed that the space will operate under the guidelines of a Type 2 ABC license, selling wine and offering tastings. It's proposed to be operated 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It is not intended to hold any special events. The town has established a policy that you are all aware of that requires 25% of wine tasting rooms to be devoted to non-wine retail. Because about 42% of the space right now is proposed for non-wine retail, this current application satisfies that requirement. Before the council, also this evening, is a revised version of Resolution 153283. The revisions include the addition of 2 conditions found on page 3, numbers 9 and 10. Condition 9 states the hours of operation, and Condition 10 is the standard language of a 6-month review period of the use permit. Those slipped by. We wanted to make sure those were included based on previous applications of the similar nature that council has approved. Staff finds that with these conditions of approval, that the proposed project is consistent with the requirements of the primary commercial zoning district and recommends the approval of the use permit. And staff is now available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Does the council have any questions of the staff report? The only question I had for you, Nathan, is referencing the number of liquor licenses that are on property. Is that's not a concern in this case, that this business is moving from the Napa Style space to a new dedicated space? There's not a concern about wine still being served in Napa Style, wine is now being served separately in the Chiarello space?
Yeah. That concern wasn't addressed during the staff analysis of the application, no.
Okay. I don't know, Steve, do we have any concern there, or?
No, we don't.
Okay. Good answer.
That question.
Yeah, Vice Mayor?
Because maybe I'm not clear. They're actually moving the wine tasting room from the current Napa Style space to V Marketplace.
Just the Chiarello.
I think we'll let the
Yeah, the
applicant
applicant may be
clarify,
able to
but
speak
what
to
I
that.
think we need to indicate that to be in better compliance with ABC license, they're separating the Chiarello Family Vineyard operations from the more, the operational structure that they have with Napa Style, but I think that's something the applicant can better clarify. But that's what's been intoned to staff, is that this is a separation of the 2 business entities to comply with licensing and regulatory compliance.
Okay. So we'll wait for the applicant.
Right. So with no other questions, I'll formally open the public hearing and invite representative of the applicant to come forward. You've already heard one of our questions, so if you could address that and any other thoughts you have. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Brooks Griffin. I work with Grupo Chiarello. Honorable Mayor and members of the council. What we plan on doing is providing a more intimate experience for our guests that are currently wine tasting with us at Napa Style. Yes, part of the inclusion is ensuring that we comply with all of the state and federal and local laws when it comes to the wine tasting. But more importantly, from a guest standpoint, we want to be able to curate an experience that is more retail focused in a smaller way, 2 to 12 people, and that we include that 42% of the floor in a retail facing way that the guests can understand that they can buy everything that we have there on the floor. Hopefully I've answered the question that from a separation standpoint, we will still contain wine within Napa Style walls. Those wines will not be Chiarella Family Vineyards.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the council of the applicant? Councilmember Dornbecker?
Will those wines, though, be available for tasting?
Correct.
So they'll be operating under separate licenses? Thank you.
I'm anticipating the vice mayor now has a question.
I'm formulating it, so give me 1 second.
While you're thinking of that, I'll ask a question, and this probably is kind of a self-contained question that I don't know if Jan wants to address, or maybe you. In terms of signage, you kind of fall under your own oversight within the V Marketplace walls. Is there any anticipation of having external signage away from the suite? I think it would only concern the town if it came outside the building, which I don't anticipate.
Only within the confines of what the city of Yountville has supplied to us. So the blade signs that they're on the street front there on Washington, that's the only signage it will have outside of the V Marketplace.
And whatever's inside the building is really your business.
Correct.
Or collectively Jan's business. Okay. Vice Mayor?
Okay, I think I have it. So you're familiar, obviously, with the Napa Style business, correct?
Absolutely.
So the permit the Napa Style carries is a 41?
I'll have to defer to.
Yeah, if you could just come up to the microphone so that...
David O'Malley, who's our Director of Operations.
Currently, it's under an O2.
So you've got a duplicate wine grower's license in Napa Style today?
Excuse me?
It's a duplicate wine grower's
That is
license.
correct. It's a duplicate O2 license.
So what's going to be retained in the existing? So I understand that you're moving the O2 from Napa Style to this new space?
We are posting for a new O2 at the new space.
Okay, that's my question. So you're looking for another or an additional duplicate wine grower's license for a different TTB permit? Because you already have one tied to the other business, is that correct?
We're going to let that O2 duplicate cease to exist once we get the new one.
Okay, so let me ask my question again.
Okay?
So in Napa Style, you have a license or a permit today.
Correct.
You're not going to export that or take it to the new property,
No.
to the new space. You're going to apply for a new one in the new space.
In the new space, we're applying for a new one. Correct.
Okay, so then in the old one, that will remain an O2 or it will move to a 41?
It's going to move to a 41.
That was my question. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And so obviously you need to comply with those regulations before you can move forward. Again, that's ABC business, not town business.
We have engaged CSA to help us with all these things. So we know exactly, they've shown us the path. This is the first step to
Okay.
do this.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions of the applicant? No, thank you very much, Brooks.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public like to speak on this item tonight? Now would be the time. The hearing is open. Seeing no one else, I'll close the public hearing and invite discussion by council or potential action on this item. Any initial thoughts? I don't have any speakers that have pushed buttons yet.
Well,
Councilmember Moeller.
so I'm just, and this is probably maybe a staff question. We really haven't, when new businesses have come and gone from V Marketplace, ever really addressed that. So is this unique just because it's wine tasting?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was easy. Great. So there'd be no other types of businesses that would have to come for the council that would be in V Marketplace, just wine tasting?
Within the primary commercial district, there's a small list of types of businesses that require a council-approved conditional use permit.
So it's that
Those
list.
related to alcohol
Okay.
among
All right.
those lists.
Familiar with that one. Okay, that's it?
Another restaurant would require a conditional use permit,
Right.
but in general, if it was, you're correct, if it was just a retail for retail, it would be done at an administrative level.
Vice Mayor?
So this may be for the town attorney. So once and if we approve this entitlement to have a wine tasting room in Suite A, which is in this larger building, does that then encumber the entire space and allow it the ability to ultimately have wine tasting rooms, or is it just allowable to this one suite? And if it does transfer from one owner to the next, does it transfer with the space?
Are you referring?
Yeah, just
You have to press the
Hit a
button.
button.
Are you referring to V Marketplace as the entity that you're, or just this particular suite within V Marketplace? That
I'm
you're-
trying to make
yeah.
sure I understand to what extent, once we approve this, is it just for the specific applicant, but then have we effectively opened the flood walls for everyone to open up a wine tasting room inside of V Marketplace with the 70 or the 25% retail diversity policy? We've got a bunch of tasting rooms with 25% retail.
No, you have not opened the door to tasting rooms all over. This is a conditional use. Let's see how to formulate my answer. Every wine tasting room would have to come before you to be able to do this. It's not that you are allowing wine tasting rooms in V Marketplace writ large. You are allowing this applicant to use this space for this purpose.
So it's not like when we have an application for a business and we grant it a permit or the conditional use permit to be able to do wine tastings, like a tasting room, that it carries on with the location itself.
No. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So is it going to then carry on with this space after, and if we approve it, that whoever comes in, there's already a conditional use of wine tasting room allowed, it would be conditioned on whatever applicant was coming forward afterwards?
No, I'm sorry. That is correct. That a conditional use permit does apply to the property as opposed to the applicant.
So it is being conditioned then to V Marketplace, but just this one particular suite?
Yes.
So this one suite going forward, if it were a new business that wanted to come in, would have a carry-forward entitlement of having a wine tasting room?
Subject to the conditions of, off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember if this particular one has some kind of expiration, some kind of, renewal that would have to come before you. But it has to do with the particular permit itself.
I think the thrust of my question
Yes.
is, are we putting an entitlement on
Right.
a section of V Marketplace, right, wrong, or indifferent, that allows not just this applicant, but any future applicant, the right to run a tasting room? Because it seems like it may potentially be a slippery slope if we start doing this in the individual spaces. Not to say that's not the best use of that, but I'm just curious as to whether or not we're creating this sort of open door policy on new tasting rooms throughout the entire town. I mean, I get that we've made these approvals. I'm just trying to make sure I understand if we're creating an unintended consequence.
Right. And so I apologize, Vice Mayor, I would have to look through this to be able to, but the short answer to your question is that conditional use permits attached to the land, not to the person.
So the suite is considered a part of a larger parcel, but it's...
But it's not saying that wine tasting rooms may be in V Marketplace.
But they could continue in this suite.
Yes, sir, assuming the conditional use permit
Is approved.
Is approved, and assuming the conditions of the conditional use permit would extend beyond whatever time period this particular applicant were in the space.
Okay. I think that answers my question.
But it applies specifically to Suite 2, not the entire property.
That is correct.
Well, then,
Councilmember Mueller?
I apologize
So
for
I
my
have
somewhat
a-
rambling response.
That's okay.
a follow-on question, which I think might help a little. So, let's say they moved out and a hairdresser moved in, then it's no longer permitted as wine tasting. You can't skip. It would have anybody. Then, if the hairdresser moved out, it wouldn't be automatically allowable for a wine tasting room to go in. They would have to come back to us for a permit.
Yes.
Is that how all these properties are going to work in this space?
Yes.
Okay. So it helps
But
a little.
Well, it explains that if a different use were requested, yes, then that would expire with the new use. But if another winery came in and wanted to open a tasting room in Suite A,
Right.
they'd be entitled to that.
Correct.
Okay.
No, that's not. Suite 2.
Suite 2, pardon me, A2, 715,
Suite
whichever
2.
one we've now approved, or would approve theoretically, Suite 2.
But there would not be the automatic entitlement for that use in any of the other suites.
Unless at some future date we
Well,
authorize.
that's not
Right.
our purview
Right.
tonight. That has
Correct.
nothing to
It's
do.
only this one
We
suite.
can't speculate on
Just
the future.
for, I think this is a, maybe a helpful clarification. In many cases, there's minor modifications. I'm going to refer to the Building B on the Summerston. The council has approved a number of projects, and ultimately, many of those have had to come back, even though they were very, very similar to the original council approvals, but each of the applicants wanted to do something slightly different, and that required them, and I just, you just were reviewing that just to give you some comfort that we do have a very restrictive conditional use process, and I think the other thing we will, I think, I'll take and do a little research is we may start putting language, if it's legally defensible, that does not allow for transfer. So we'll do a little research on that to see if that's something that, going forward, if that's of concern to the council, that we can try to identify, especially in an area like where it's a subunit space rather than a unique space.
Okay.
Any further discussion by the council?
I have one thing.
Yes, Councilmember Dornbecker?
So, to understand this completely, however, if, for example, Chiarella Family Vineyards did choose to move out of that space and another purveyor wanted to move into that space, they too would have to also get the ABC license. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
They would have to meet all of the conditions of the existing conditional use permit.
So the ABC license doesn't necessarily go with but the user's permit does.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion by council? I'll just make the comment that I see, just knowing how management has controlled the diversity of retail opportunities in V Marketplace for decades, I'd say, and the fact that they already have V Wine Cellar as an established wine retail and tasting space, I would not anticipate a run on interest in having additional competing businesses in that space. That's just my thought on that, but if things change, we deal with it as it comes. Is there action to be had by the council on this item? Seeing nobody step forward, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt resolution number 15-3283, approving a use permit for the Chiarella Family Vineyards, mixed retail and tasting room, 6525 Washington Street, suite number 2, with the additional 2 conditions as listed in the amended resolution items 9 and 10 as they relate to hours of operation and a 6-month review period once the occupancy starts.
I'll second it.
Gotta hit your motion.
Yeah, I didn't have to.
Well, then I'll do it.
Thank you. So, motion by me and a second by Councilmember Dornbecker. Is there any additional discussion? Please cast your votes. And wait for the 10-second delay.
That was operator that come in.
She was busy doing your job.
Dramatic effect.
Motion.
Dramatic effect. That's right. She was entering my motion.
God, I hope it's 5-0.
And it's unanimously passed. So congratulations.
How did you vote that?
Thank you for bringing your presentation to us tonight, and good luck with that shift in business.
I might say one word, maybe make everyone feel a little bit better.
You don't need to.
Okay,
but-
then.
No, go.
Rita
Okay,
wants me to.
Jan.
Good evening, Jan Fector, V Marketplace. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. The current ownership doesn't desire any further wine tasting in V Marketplace. We have our niche, and it works. And additionally, there are only a couple of spaces within the complex that have water sewer to them, which is a requirement. So other than Kohler chocolates, gosh, right off the top of my head, nothing else on the interior of the complex has water and sewer to it other than this space and Kohler Chocolate. So it would be very unlikely in the near future that we would become before you for any further wine tasting. So
Next time I'll
Appreciate it.
invite you to speak during the public hearing part of
I was
that
going to raise my hand. You
application.
know how much I love being at the podium. And this is a very cool new system. I hadn't seen that before. So thank you
Thank
all
you.
for your consideration and good evening.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks. We are going to move on to our second public hearing, a design review for Gates Estates. Marlene.
Thank you, Mayor Dunbar, members of the council. I just wanted to let you know that Cindy Gates is not here this evening. I believe she sent a representative, but she's in Europe. And since we thought this was a fairly quick item, she wanted to get started this year and not wait another month, because your next meeting isn't for another month. We're going to hold the staff report and present the staff report this evening without her being here. So hopefully there are not questions that either her son or I can't answer. But she did understand that if there were any issues that the council needed to discuss with her, that we would continue this until a time that she could be here. So thanks for that. The Gates Estates project is located at 2080 Humboldt Street, and the site is approximately 3,920 square feet. It's in a residentially scaled commercial zone district. The lot is approximately 90 feet wide and 45 feet deep. It has residential uses on the north and east and commercial uses to the south and west. It's currently developed as a vacant 2,100 square foot single-family residence and a detached 650 square foot garage storage shed. The existing FAR on the site is 0.70. Last summer, on July 15th, the town council approved a rezone of the property, the subject property, to residential scale commercial in order for the owner to develop the property as a commercial building with a second unit on the second floor. This approval was granted to allow the property to accommodate a ground floor commercial office space of 1,589 square feet and the second unit upstairs of 500 square feet. The council approved that rezone. The owner and architect have now developed drawings in conformance with the council's review of the proposed construction, and the drawings are now before the town council for commercial design review. The office space would gain access from an entrance on Humboldt Street, and the apartment would gain access from an exterior stairwell at the rear south side of the property. The applicant is also proposing to modify the landscaping on the property, installing drought-tolerant landscaping and drip irrigation system in accordance with Town of Yountville drought emergency conservation regulations. The applicant is also proposing signage at the main entrance to the office. Up on the board is a rendering of the proposed project. It is a little misleading. The colors didn't turn out very well on the rendering, and so the material samples are actually on the sideboard here, if the council would like to see them close up.
The rendering's not up.
Yeah, it's not this one. Oh, okay. I thought he put it up. Sorry.
It's on your.
Okay. Did I just do it?
I do it.
Oh,
Tell me when.
so I see.
I got it done. Yeah.
Okay, but I was doing full screen, so. Here.
There you go.
It says no signal.
That's when it does.
Oh, that means it's good?
Yep.
It's going to flicker.
We were going to do it full screen. The little square on the bottom. Why don't you show me?
It's okay.
Okay, you can still see it anyways. Yeah, so the rendering isn't really exactly like the siding color, but you get the general idea of what the building looks like from the rendering. As discussed in the previous town council meeting, a historic resource evaluation was completed as a part of the rezone application. Although the structure was built in the early 1900s and served for a time as the Yountville Post Office, it has been extensively altered and moved from its original location on Washington Street, and therefore the current structure does not maintain historic integrity to qualify it as a historic resource. The construction of the office and apartment will be contained within the existing footprint and is constructed to the same intent that was presented during the rezone application. The second floor will be completely removed and rebuilt to current building standards. The short walls within the first floor, part of an old addition, will be demolished and rebuilt to current building standards. The renovated structure will have 10-foot ceilings on both the floor and the new gable entrance. The exterior will be clad in vertical fir siding, which will resemble old barn wood in a circle sawn pattern and weathered gray stain. The roof is clad with a standing seam metal roof, weathered copper in color. A new front porch and ADA accessible ramp is constructed on the north. The existing concrete carport will be demolished and replaced with a stamped concrete parking area paved with permeable block. The parking will be accommodated with a 1 ADA spot and in 5 standard parking places. Automatic irrigation system will be installed to minimize water usage. Per the rezone approval, a new 6-foot tall concrete wall will be constructed around the property and specifically on the east side of the property where the project abuts a residence. The wall will be formed vertically with 2x6 and 2x10 boards to give the finished appearance of a wood fence. The conceptual rezone plan showed 4 on-street parking places, 2 spaces in the garage, and 2 tandem spaces in the breezeway. A traffic study that was completed as part of that application projected a total of 19 average daily trips and residential for both the office and the residential uses, and on a parking demand of 6 spaces. As a result of that parking analysis, the applicant is now taking down the barn, or taking down the existing garage and carport and replacing it with a stamped concrete parking lot that will hold 6 spaces, 3 tandem spaces. The demolishing of the existing garage does result in benefits on the FAR reductions, which exceed current standards. The existing single-family residence is a legal non-conforming structure for setbacks and FAR because it was built prior to the adoption of the zoning and design ordinance. The rules on legal non-conforming buildings allow the continued use and maintenance of these structures, but strictly prohibits their restoration after destruction. Eventually, non-conforming buildings are to be eliminated or altered to conform to the code. This concept was considered by the town council because the non-conforming status of the structure was an important consideration in the applicant's future renovation efforts for the property. The applicant indicated at the time that both the structure exhibited termite and rot damage and that there would be extensive renovations. Additionally, the existing plate height is quite low, sometimes in some parts as low as 5 feet. As a result, it was pointed out to the town council during those discussions that renovation of the building would likely include an increase in both the first and second floor plate heights. If the applicant were proposing to raise the entire structure to accomplish the goals identified above, the new structure would have to conform with the existing code, meaning that it would have to be reduced by about 500 square feet to comply with FAR requirements. The applicant has opted to extensively remodel the structure in order to maintain a higher FAR for the building. In reviewing the building code, a remodel is not defined to specify a specific percentage of the structure to remain. It's simply that any wall that remains allows that to be called a remodel. As I stated earlier, the existing FAR is 0.70. Under the current code requirements, a new structure would have to conform with 0.40, which is 0.25 for the commercial and 0.15 for residential. As I stated earlier, with the garage removal, it does help the project come into more compliance with FAR requirements and drops that FAR to 0.53. It also results in the parcel satisfying the town's parking standards, and parking, as we know, is very dear in that area. In terms of the signage, the applicant proposes a simple non-illuminated wall-hung sign that's approximately 36 inches wide by 18 inches in height, constructed of the same material as the siding with a black background and white lettering. Staff has analyzed the proposed signage and finds that it conforms with the sign ordinance. In addition, the RSC zone requires that lots of less than 10,000 square feet provide 10% of open space, which means that approximately 390 square feet should be provided. The applicant is currently providing approximately 18%. The town's housing element contains several policies that trigger replacement housing upon certain events. It does not apply to this project because the existing single-family dwelling would be replaced with a smaller, more affordable apartment unit. The unit would not be lost. Housing Element Policy 28 requires the preservation and replacement of existing affordable housing units. Lost new construction, again, that is not triggered as a result of this project. The ZDRB considered this project at the July 14th, 2015 meeting, and we didn't have a quorum, although we did ask both Cook and Janes, our two commissioners, to provide some input to the council as it moves forward. The two comments that were made were that the trim should be painted a different color so as to provide more contrast between the siding and the trim to give the building a more residential feel. The applicant has modified the paint colors of the trim to provide greater contrast than what was provided in the original application. And again, concerns were expressed about the FAR exceedance, although the structure is considered legal nonconforming for FAR. Staff is supportive of this project and recommends approval of the design review for the remodel proposed, subject to conditions of approval that are attached in the resolution. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions of the staff report? Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes, thank you, Marlene. I wondered about the ADA compliance for the rental unit upstairs.
There is no requirement that there be an elevator for a second unit, a residential unit, to my knowledge.
There is not?
No.
And on the main building, is this going to be an extension of the Gates Estates office?
As I understand it, the office is going to be moving, and I do not know what she's planning for the other space. At least that's what as I understand it.
I see. Thank you.
Other questions of the report?
Yeah.
Councilmember Durham?
So just so I get this correct, the FAR is exceeded, but the open space is exceeded at the same time?
The open space is exceeded as well.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And I did the math from the question I asked you earlier, so I apologize. Any feedback from the neighbors on the east or across the street?
We did not receive any contact from either the residential properties. We did talk to the wine tasting room that was next door, and they did come to the ZDRB meeting and were supportive of the design.
Great. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, questions?
No questions.
So, Marlene, I have a question about the second floor specifically, because when I'm looking at the drawings PDF attachment, and the way that's presented, that does not look like a square 500-foot apartment unit upstairs with a deck. And when I look at drawing A4, I see a square 500-foot.
Is this one? This is the one you're looking at?
No.
You're looking at the one that's in.
I'm looking at the second floor plan that says it's basically not quite exactly square. There appears to be an outside deck with a fan, and I don't see that as represented in the renderings, either of the two renderings of the building. It looks like a large rectangular space up on the second floor in the renderings.
This one, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's downstairs. That's what. That's the first floor. So he's talking about second floor. He's on 8 page A4.
Yeah, what is that deck?
Well, that's the first floor. Okay. That's the first floor. Sorry, there we go.
I see no deck represented in the exterior renderings either direction, looking from the east or the west.
As I understand, that is on the rear. So
There's virtually no explanation for the location of the second floor apartment unit, which is I'm concerned about, because it's in the drawings it's represented one way, and in the rendering, it's represented differently, in my
Okay,
opinion.
the rendering that we just had up, let me go to that, is just of the front.
And it looks like a rectangular space on the second floor, larger than
I think-
500 square feet.
Well, I think it's a little bit, you're looking at a different rendering than the one I have up on the board, and I think it's a little misleading. The drawing was actually done by the contractor, and I think the perspective is off. We did have a lot of problems with the drawings. Like I said, the colors weren't coming out correctly, and I think if you're looking at the one that was part of the packet, then the perspective is off. And so there is a deck in the back, but it's not going to be visible from the angle that you're looking at in terms of
But it
the,
would be visible from the apartment or the residential unit of the neighboring property at
that's correct.
Heston.
Yes, it
So
would, from Heston's, yes, it
It
would.
matters, in my opinion, and it's not represented at all. So I'm also concerned just about the rendering being disproportionate to what it's supposed to actually look like. And I also don't quite understand how the unit is accessed. It's an exterior staircase?
Yes, it's
That's
an
not
exterior
shown in the rendering either.
you're right. You have to really look at the floor plan. The floor plan is much better, but the rendering it's done on an AutoCAD program that's not
But that's
done by an
what's
architect.
presented.
Correct.
So that's what I'm basing my opinion on.
Right, I know, I understand.
It looks to me like in the same document I'm referring to, which has a perspective from the northwest looking back, also, by the way, a very lovely, panoramic landscape all around this building, which doesn't exist. But it looks like the deck is out the southwest corner of the upstairs. But again, that does not look at all like a 500 square foot apartment. And I don't see how you get to that apartment.
Actually, if I could encourage you to look at A7.
And A8.
A7 and A8, actually, but I'm also going to agree, you have to look at the floor plan. You will see on the floor plan that there is a rear stairway that goes up. There's a small landing deck, patio, and then that larger square is actually the apartment unit. But I am going to agree with the concerns that the initial rendering you were looking at, it doesn't have a center stairway, it has a rear stairway.
So if you're referring cross-section E on drawing A8, I have no idea where that stairwell is.
If you look
Yeah,
at the floor plan.
A7
Yeah,
is
look
a
at
better.
A7, it's in the back. You can see the stairs there on the back.
Just below.
A7 on the lower right.
So it's completely missing in the rendering, in the
Well, you
exterior
can't,
rendering.
you wouldn't be able to see it from the front of the street, and the rendering that you're looking at.
Why don't we
is
have a
from the-
rendering of the backside where the stairwell is and the outside deck is? And, I mean, those are elements that matter, I think. This is also next to a residential home immediately to the east of
Yes.
this stairwell.
Yes.
Perhaps the applicant's representative can address the submittals.
Okay. That's my greatest concern, is what's going on upstairs, how it's accessed, where is the exterior exposure, how is it impacting the neighbors to the south and to the east? So, any other questions of the staff report? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and formally open the public hearing and invite a representative for the applicant to come forward. Welcome.
Good evening. Mike Berlucci from Gates Estates. I just literally found out about this about an hour before I showed up here, so I'm not too sure. I do know that Cindy has more full-size renderings and stuff at the office. The staircase is in the back leading up to, so I guess the staircase would face towards the east and go up, from the way I understand it, to the back loft.
And that's the way this drawing shows it, just kind of crudely, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But-
I don't have
okay.
a copy with me, but from what I understand, yeah, she's had an architect and a contractor draw it all out.
Was there anything else that you were prepared to
Like I said,
reference? Right. No, I understand. I don't
I
want
got this feeding my son dinner going, you're going to be there in an hour, right? So,
Fair enough.
yeah. So I'd say defer any questions to Cindy. I did hear somebody say that Gates Estates office was moving. That's not happening.
Okay.
So,
Did you say your name for the record?
Mike.
Mike.
Last name is Bertolucci, UCCI,
Thank you.
Mulberry Street.
Mulberry Street.
Would you be able to explain the relationship between the current Gates commercial space and this commercial use?
This is one of Cindy's projects. This is not going to be tied in with Gates Estates Real Estate. It's not going to be an expansion of our office or our business. From what I understand, it's going to be a private residence upstairs, something that will be rented out, and then office space that will be leased.
Independent office space?
Independent, I'd probably say not to a competing real estate office, but yeah, to whoever wanted to lease it out.
You wouldn't have a front door or any windows if it was a competing real estate space. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
I think if you recall when we had the rezone and the concept, Ms. Gates indicated that she wanted to control the property for future expansion growth, and in the interim indicated that it was likely going to be that she would rent out office because we have as you know, an office shortage. So she felt that that was something that met the community's interest needs, and that she'd been approached by a number of people willing to rent an office and looking for that space. So I do think that continues to be her intent with regards to that.
Okay. Anyone from the public like to comment on this project? Application, at least? Seeing no one move forward, I'll formally close the public hearing and invite further discussion by the council. Is there any other thought about my concerns about upstairs, or is that just something that I'm concerned about? Any thoughts?
I don't,
Councilmember Dornbecker?
thank you. I think that we do have a shortage of office space, so I'm glad to hear that she's creating office space in town. We do need it, and I don't see a problem with the deck. I can see the deck portrayed in the drawings, and anyway, I think that it's the design is nice. I like it, so I would support it.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Councilmember Durham?
Based on actually in Heston coming to the ZDRB, who would be directly affected by the deck as well, in their support of this, to me states that it's not going to be an issue with them as well. So based on the staff's report, I support this as well.
Councilmember Mueller?
Can I just ask the staff, let me get my button, just to, again, discuss the parking with all these proposed spaces? There was adequate parking?
The parking study that was done showed that the parking bin was for 6 spaces, and originally they were only showing 4 when you considered the rezone application. As a result of that parking study and your approval of the rezone, they've decided to eliminate the garage, and then that gives enough room to put 6 in, so that does meet the parking demand.
Okay, so the garage will be gone?
Yes.
Okay. Based on that, I'm fine with it too.
Vice Mayor, any thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't, maybe I glossed over it here. Did Heston actually go and participate in the ZDRB meeting, and they were the ones that were supportive of this?
Yes, they did come to that was the only member of the public that was at the ZDRB meeting. We didn't have either of the neighbors, but Heston's were there.
Okay, and my only rationale for why that's important, frankly, is because when the project was being built there, I know that it was a little tenuous with regards to their building a second story on what was, technically a second-story building, but that there was some encumbrance or light study or whatever that was going on, and I don't know, you put a patio in someone's view space. I know what I do on my patios, but maybe these people won't. That being said, in general, I think the concept is, it's fairly clean. I'm not entirely sure about the mayor's thoughts around the stairwell, but entering from the back makes sense. We do have a lack of office space in the community, and I know we don't have a lot of open space to be able to building them in, so it would be a welcome addition from that standpoint. It appears, although no one's renting the current house that was there, once we rezoned it, it looks like we're going to gain one component for housing. You did mention that it was going to be more affordable. I'm not sure what that means in this community anymore.
Right. Well, it'll be smaller. It's not covered by it's not an affordable unit. It's not going to be covered by the town's
So there was no
affordable
intent to
requirements.
say that was a.
This is, I'll clarify and
Just wanna make sure I
and
understand.
provide some, this is a market rate apartment I think the pricing will be more reflective of the size and amenity, and I'll draw the council and the community's concurrence. We have a similar approach to there is an apartment and office shared on the second floor of the Summerston building. It also uses a rear stairway entry. And we also have, which many people may not be aware of, there are 4 apartments that are located in the North Block Hotel that are part of our policies to improve housing accessibility. So when we talk about affordability, it's that an apartment will generally on market rent less than a single-family home.
Right, okay. I just want to make sure I responded to that.
But it is not a deed-restricted affordable, so we do want to make that clarification.
Thank you.
And I'll just, you finish?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm just going to reiterate, I find it confusing the way the drawings and renderings don't match. And I'd like to be able to support the project. I think everything else about it makes sense and would be a value add, but I'm not sure what I'm approving upstairs. I really don't. I think it's a very poor representation of what's written in the architectural renderings, what's being presented visually. So I have a problem with that, and I don't want to just make assumptions on what they mean. I just wish that they had given us a much cleaner presentation of what their expectations are. I believe I understand what they're saying about the stairwell on the back, but then when I'm looking at the living area, it says first floor, and it doesn't really show where this 500 square foot apartment is. And so that's a problem for me. It's immediately adjacent to the Heston residential unit, and it's in close proximity to the neighbor to the immediate east, even though there is a parking lot in between. This is a second-story residential unit that would basically look over that that neighbor, and so that gives me a little bit of pause. So I have very mixed feelings about it, but that's why there are 5 of us. Is there any further discussion or proposed action?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 15-3284, approving the design review for Gates Estates and the remodel on an existing commercial structure, including signage, located at 2080 Humboldt Street, APN 036-061-013.
Motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, seconded by Councilmember Durham. Please cast your ballots. We're going to break a trend here.
Thank you.
But it does pass with a 4-to-1 vote, with myself being the no vote, but it does pass 4-to-1. So congratulations to the representative of the applicant, and if you could please pass that word along, we appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to talk about some clean energy and discussion regarding potential participation by the town of Yountville in the Marin Clean Energy Program.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Briefly, the item before you tonight is an introduction of a current opportunity or initiative that is occurring in Napa County. It's also something that's of interest to our Go Green initiative and our committee. And tonight we're going to hear a presentation from Jerry Gill with Sustainable Napa County explaining their role and how a partnership with Marin Clean Energy could be of interest to the community. So the action that the council will be asked to do is listen to the presentation, and then if there's an interest, provide direction on whether you would like for the town to continue with a letter of interest to Marin Clean Energy, and then staff would continue and do further analysis. So we'll let the 2 presentations. Jerry Gill is here with Sustainable Napa County, and Allison Hang with Marin Clean Energy.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Mayor and members of the council, I want to clarify that I am in fact no way giving a presentation. So don't worry, you're not going to be here all night. We don't have to call in.
Well,
for,
we might still be
for
here all night,
pizza.
but it
Well, you
won't
could
be
be,
your
but not
fault.
because of me. No. So I will spend just a few moments talking a little bit more about the localized angle of this, and I will hand it over to Allison Hang, who does a great job answering all of the questions and giving you a great overview of the program. But a little bit of history. This came up about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when the 4 counties, Solano, Napa, Sonoma, and Marin counties, had a joint Board of Supervisors meeting in Napa at Hat Hall. Each county presented information about a program that they were currently working on that they were particularly proud of or wanted to share so that folks could get more information about maybe how to coordinate or to research and develop that in their own communities. Marin gave a presentation on their community choice energy program called Marin Clean Energy. Our Board of Supervisors went, and no pun intended, but the light bulb went on and said, wow, we kind of want to do that too. We'd like to explore that. At the time, Marin Clean Energy was opening up their program to other jurisdictions, not just contained within Marin County, and so there was an opportunity for Napa County to join on in this turnkey program to access more renewable energy for utility customers in the unincorporated area. That process took about 18 months, but Napa County has now been in that program since February, and I think we sent some information around. There was a couple newspaper articles and more information from the county, so hopefully you had a chance to read that. Sustainable Napa County is involved because one of our key goals is to increase the amount of locally generated and distributed renewable energy, and we think this is one way to get there. A community choice energy program is a tool in a toolbox that we have with a lot of other tools to help bring more renewable energy to our communities, as well as increase demand for renewable energy in general, so everyone is getting more. It's an optional program. It's voluntary, so you don't have to be a part of Marin Clean Energy. It is another choice alongside PG&E. Marin Clean Energy partners with PG&E to continue to deliver the energy, so they are working on this together. One of the things that SNC particularly likes about a program like this is that it gives people who otherwise may not have access to renewable energy, and in particular in our community solar, because perhaps the cost is too high for them at that time. They're renters. There is something about their home or their rooftop that really doesn't make solar appropriate. I'm one of those folks. My roof is oriented wrong, and I don't really use enough electricity to warrant an entire solar system of my own, but I can opt into this program and stay opted in so that I can choose to purchase 50 or 100% renewable power, and I feel like I'm actually doing something that aligns with my values. Again, it's voluntary. Customers are free to choose if they want to stay in the program, and really whatever makes sense for them environmentally or economically. It can increase the use of renewable energy in a community really in one fell swoop, if you will. Overnight, once the program is online, 50 to 100% of the power from utility customers is all of a sudden renewable, which really aligns well with our community goals for greenhouse gas emission reductions and for energy and for climate. And it really aligns well with energy efficiency programs that PG&E and Marin Clean Energy have, as well as programs like the Property Assessed Clean Energy, where you can finance energy efficiency upgrades and solar energy on your property tax bill, should you wish. It also really, as I mentioned before, helps drive the demand for local renewable power, and that in turn helps stimulate the economy, perhaps creates new jobs, really does help us achieve our goals as a community. One of the things that we are hoping for and why we're before you tonight is a coordinated approach. So the County of Napa is already in the program, and they are currently, Marin Clean Energy is currently considering other jurisdictions who would like to join. And we thought, wouldn't it be nice if our little county, if all 6 jurisdictions were now in this program, and that the other 5 remaining could do it in some coordinated fashion so that the outreach and the messaging to community members and businesses and customers in our communities countywide is consistent, and it's happening at the same time, so no one is confused and no one feels like they're being left out. And then there is also required by the Public Utilities Commission a feasibility study that Marin Clean Energy has to do to assess when they have new partner communities come online and come into their program. The cost of that feasibility study would be roughly a total of $18,000 that the 5 jurisdictions could somehow proportionally share and have it all taken care of at once, rather than piecemealing it, doing their own feasibility studies at whatever time possibly that you might be interested in joining individually. And so we were hoping for a coordinated approach. The Marin Clean Energy Board is having their strategic planning retreat in mid-September, which is when they will be considering new member jurisdictions, and we think it would be great if the 5 communities that are left in Napa County could individually send letters raising their hand, getting in line, and asking to be considered. Again, it is, I wanted to state, if I haven't already, it is a non-binding letter of interest. So really it's just saying, hey, we think this sounds like it might be something we're interested in. Put us in line. We'd like to take the next steps if it works for us. If it doesn't work for us, then we have no commitment. There's no risk. It's really just a way to raise our hands and kind of put the stake in the ground so that we can have a coordinated clean energy program in Napa County. So, did I miss anything?
Could you provide an update on what the other
Yes.
jurisdictions have been doing?
Yes, I did miss something. So we have been working on this, again, for the last couple months, and the 28th of July, St. Helena approved a letter of interest. They received a presentation, and at the same meeting sent a letter, or approved sending a letter of interest. Calistoga has already had a presentation, and I believe by the end of the month they will be asking their staff to send a letter, hopefully. American Canyon and Napa are both hearing a presentation on August 18th, 3:30 at the Napa City Council, and the evening at the American Canyon City Council. So hopefully by September 1st we'll have an idea of where everyone is in the process, but it's all moving in the right direction. So we have at least 2 jurisdictions, and 3 including the county, who are clearly interested in the program. So you wouldn't be out on a skinny branch by yourself. It's on a big, thick branch with lots of room for everybody. Maybe a tree house.
Yeah. Questions about part 1 of the 2-parter?
That is.
That's it? Okay.
I
All
think,
right.
hold on just a second.
Yeah?
Councilmember Mueller?
So part 2 is technical? I have technical questions.
Yes, and that's when I would run, but
Before you run, I do
Yes.
have a non-technical question. My first understanding was just submitting the letter cost us nothing,
cost you nothing.
but in the staff report, it says there is a fiscal impact. The fiscal impact wouldn't happen until we find out if we consider this viable.
That's
for
correct.
Yountville.
The fiscal impact would be a level of potential
Part of the 18,000,
participation
but
of
that's
the
not what we'd
18,000.
be approving
You're
tonight.
not approving that, right.
So I just want to make that clear. It does say
We're
there is a
just
fiscal
trying to make
impact.
sure the council is aware that future actions would have a small fiscal impact.
A proportion of the 18,000.
Yeah.
So
And
now-
that would only be after the board meets in mid-September, and they say, yes, these 5 jurisdictions, yes, we'd like to have them. Then we would individually come back before you, and that's when sort of it's a trigger, and then the next steps could possibly happen.
So I'm not sure if my next question is for you or not, but does Marin Clean Energy require all of the jurisdictions because of the amount of population in Napa County to participate?
No.
Or it doesn't matter that you might only have 75,000 people out of the 150, you can still potentially do it?
Absolutely. Any jurisdiction is welcome to join or not. And like I said, it was really just our ideal approach is that if everyone wanted to, rather than waiting a whole other cycle or whole other year, if the 5 that were remaining are interested and could do it together, it would be a really efficient way to handle the feasibility study, the outreach, and so that all of a sudden everybody in the county has access to this optional program. But if that's not something that Yountville is interested in at the time when it gets to that decision point, you're also free to say, yeah, not right now.
I just remember there was a presentation from 2 different clean energy groups, and I fairly sure Marin was one of the two to the North Bay Division of the League of California Cities.
I think so,
And
yeah.
I thought I heard, and maybe it was from the other agency, that there was a concern about needing a sufficient amount of population to make the energy efficiency efficient.
Right. So that there's an economy of
Yes.
scale, if you would.
But you're saying that's
Allison
not an issue, or-
might answer that, but it hasn't come up yet so far. I think if anyone is interested in joining their,
If I could,
Yeah.
Mayor, I believe the conversation you're referring to, and yes, Marin was discussion, that was at the very initial stages, and I think what you're going to hear today from Marin Clean Energy staff is that they've achieved their initial startup goals and objectives, and they now have a scale to which they are looking selectively and in a geographical region that makes sense for them to perhaps expand and take the program.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, Vice Mayor had a question.
I just have one question.
Sure. I hope I have one answer.
Well, maybe two then.
Okay.
So, many years ago, you used to be able to buy clean energy from Rocky Mountain Clean Energy. If you might recall that, many of us who wrote those checks to them besides PG&E. Why is it that they went with Napa County first and didn't look at one of the, and I get the scale issue, but why would Napa County have gone in without incorporating or engaging the rest of the agencies or municipalities?
I think it was just their timing. They were very excited about it, and it was something that they decided that they wanted to just do for their unincorporated citizens. I don't have any further answers than that. I'm only kind of speculating on
Just
what it,
curious.
I think it was just it was an opportunity that presented itself, and it was a timing issue where they were taking new applications at that time, and so they acted on that. And I think just seize the moment, if you will. The other, back to your question about the smaller communities, I do know that Benicia has just joined Marin Clean Energy. Davis is also in line, I think, are interested. So I think the smaller community is exactly what Steve was saying, is that they have met their scale at this point. Another thing that I wanted to make sure you're aware of is if you join Marin Clean Energy, that every jurisdiction has a seat on the board. So just because you all join at the same time doesn't mean that there's in any way that you're disenfranchised from that board. So every jurisdiction would be expected to have a member of an elected body on that board, and you become a voting member of Marin Clean Energy representing your community. So I know that's not an answer to your question, so I'm going to come back to you because I think you had a second part.
No, I think I asked it.
Okay,
You answered.
okay.
Thank you.
Since you brought that up, is there a voting structure that's already in place for that board? Like, is it the same proportion as population, or is it a one-to-one?
I'm not sure how that works. Allison can answer that, but I will make sure that if you do join, that you get to vote first every time.
Is it electronic voting? Because
I hope so, because this is very cool. I like it.
Thank you, Jerry.
All right, thank you. So I will, I can introduce Allison. Okay, so Allison and I have been working closely together on just getting information together so that we can present this to communities and that you feel like you have the best information that you need to make an informed decision. So Allison is what is your title? Community Development Manager for Marin Clean Energy, and I think she probably feels like she lives in Napa County by now because we keep pulling her over here and asking her to come and join us. But she did a lot of the heavy lifting during the county process. They put together a community leader advisory group on the outreach plan, so there is a lot of back and forth with all the communities who are involved, and so she's done a great job so far. She can answer a lot of your technical questions, but she's going to give an overview of really how it works, what all the moving parts are, and some of the technical information specifically about the power mix, and then I will turn it over to her and she can answer the rest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I just?
I don't know if it works. Will it work over there? I can push it.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it
If it
doesn't.
doesn't work, then I can.
Hey. Thank you for the introduction. I joke with the staff at MCE that I'm going to staff the Napa branch when we open it. So, but there's no plans for that right now. So I'm here to give an overview of the MCE program. All right. Well, maybe before I do that, I'll answer your questions. First, about voting. There is a one-to-one voting for each member on the board, but there's also a proportional voting system based on usage of electricity. So annual kilowatt hours for the jurisdiction. So both of those come into play. And with the county, the reason that the cities weren't approached at the same time was because we have, our membership structure is set for 40,000 accounts or less. And if they included all the cities, we would have to move into a special consideration membership. Not that we couldn't have done that, but it was just easier for them to go forward with the membership structure we had set up at the time. So onto the MCE program.
Probably the other side.
Other side. Yes, okay. So MCE is a community choice aggregator, or CCA. CCAs have operated successfully in Illinois and the Northeast for decades, and the legislation that made it possible in California was passed in 2002, Assembly Bill 117. CCA enables communities to aggregate or pool their electricity demand in order to purchase power on behalf of residential, commercial, and municipal accounts. As a CCA, MCE provides electric generation options to our member communities. We buy and build cleaner electricity supply, and the incumbent investor-owned utility, in this case PG&E, continues to provide transmission, delivery, and billing. So using this model, we're able to provide all customers in our member jurisdictions a choice for where their electricity comes from. Communities can form CCAs for all sorts of reasons. These are the 4 reasons that are driving factors for MCE. First, to use more renewable energy in order to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are produced by the creation of electricity. So we try to get as much renewable power as possible into our generation mix while still maintaining low competitive rates. Because low stable rates are important, we only set our rates once a year through a public process, and we try to set them below PG&E's rates. Responding to community needs, because we're a community-based organization in every aspect of what we do, from our power sources, to our rates, to our energy efficiency, to our community outreach, as Jerry mentioned, we actively seek and incorporate community input. And then local control and governance. With MCE, communities have a say in where their power comes from and how much they pay for that power. MCE is a not-for-profit public power agency. We're governed by a board of directors comprised of 1 elected official per member town, city, or county, as Jerry mentioned. All of our board meetings are public, including meetings where we set electricity rates. But we don't use taxpayer funds. We're completely funded through ratepayer revenue. Like PG&E, we report to the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission. So there is regulatory oversight. And as an agency, we formed in 2008, started serving customers in 2010, and we currently serve about 80% of the customers in our service area, which is now Marin County, unincorporated Napa County, Benicia, San Pablo, and El Cerrito. So with MCE, our member communities have choice, and that's really important to MCE. Customers in our service area actually have 4 choices. They can go with PG&E's generation mix, which is 27% renewable, MCE's light green mix, which is 56% renewable, and less expensive than PG&E for all rate categories. We have a deep green 100% renewable option. That's 1 penny more per kilowatt hour than light green, which for the typical home is about $5 more a month. Half of that goes to buying the additional renewable energy. The other half goes into a local renewable development fund, which we use for local renewable projects. So right now we're using that to build a 10 megawatt solar facility in Richmond. And then finally later this year we're going to be offering Local Sol. That's a 100% local solar option. All of the power for that is going to come from a small solar facility that's being built in Novato right now for MCE customers. It's about 30% more expensive than Deep Green because it's a local development and that's more expensive, but the price is also locked for 20 years. So just to give you an idea of how these 4 options compare price-wise, the 4 options are the columns, and the rows break down the various components of the electricity bill. The first row is delivery. Regardless of what option you choose, PG&E provides delivery and it costs exactly the same. The second row, electric generation, is what varies. So light green is the least expensive option, deep green is that penny more per kilowatt hour, and then local solar is that fixed 20-year rate. PG&E does assess additional fees on MCE customers. Those are approved by the California Public Utilities Commission, and we always include them in price comparisons for customers on our website everywhere because it's part of the bottom line cost for customers. And then looking at the final row is the totals. Light green's the least expensive, deep green's a few dollars more, and local solar reflects the premium of local development. It's also really important to note with cost that customers that have CARE, FARA, or medical baseline discounts receive the exact same discounts with MCE. So customers that choose light green do see savings. This slide shows the typical annual savings for home and business with MCE's light green. Rates do change regularly though. As I mentioned, we change our rates once per year through a public process. PG&E tends to change their rates 3 to 5 times a year. We don't guarantee that we'll always be less expensive than PG&E because they could lower their rates. But for about half the time we've been serving customers, we have been less expensive. And in 2014, we saved customers about $5.9 million. This year, we're expected to save customers about $10.6 million, which is especially great for our local governments and organizations like our school districts that save substantial amounts of money while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, the city of San Rafael saved $47,000 in 2014 and 187 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And that's just for the municipal accounts. So power sources. This map shows where our power comes from, our renewable power. Just by redirecting power that people are already buying to more renewable sources, we've been able to achieve 59,000 tons of greenhouse gas reductions. And that's really what it's about for us. Most of our power comes from California. We do have sources in Oregon and Washington, but all of our long-term contracts are for California-based renewables because we want to support California renewables as much as possible. Also, by increasing the demand for renewable energy, we're contributing to the construction of new California renewable energy. So as this slide shows, our new California renewable energy projects already produce enough power for about 85,000 homes per year. And this map is one of our favorite. It shows new renewable projects in development in our service area right now. So we have a program called Feed-in Tariff where we offer to buy the power from new, small, renewable energy projects at above market rates. So that encourages local businesses and organizations to develop renewable energy projects, supporting local jobs, new local streams of revenue, and producing power that will provide MCE customers more renewable power. We have 10 programs, or 10 projects in this program in Marin and Richmond, and we're working closely with our new service areas to try to get projects started there as well, too. And because being responsive to community needs is part of our mission as an organization, we also offer a number of local programs that are tailored to our communities. We offer energy efficiency programs that are funded through the same source as PG&E's, the public purpose charge on your electricity bill. We partnered with Tesla to provide battery storage options for some of our customers. We supported electric vehicle charging stations, and we have a very generous net energy metering program for solar customers that I'd be happy to talk more about in the question and answer. And all this is in addition to what PG&E offers. MCE doesn't take away anything, we only expand options. So how does the switchover happen? State law requires public power agencies like MCE to be the default provider in our member communities. So when a new community joins MCE, we set an enrollment date, and on that enrollment date, all accounts are switched over to MCE's light green, more renewable, less expensive service, unless people choose to opt out. Because of the opt-out aspect, we do extensive outreach around the enrollment date. State law requires that we send 4 enrollment notices to all customers. We send 5 for good measure. We also partner with community groups. We host informational meetings. We table at events. And we advertise because we really want everyone to know about the program and how enrollment works. So during the whole enrollment period, which lasts 60 days before enrollment to 60 days after enrollment, customers can opt out at any time for free. And if they opt out, they can return to MCE with no restrictions. After the enrollment period, customers can still opt out at any time. There's just a one-time $5 fee for residential accounts, one-time $25 fee for commercial accounts, and PG&E prevents customers from returning to MCE for a year. So if they change their mind, they have to wait before returning. But the options are always there, and that's really the point of MCE and the key benefit that we bring are the choices. So in the county of Napa, we saw really great results with enrollment. 91% of people chose to stay with MCE, and we saw high adoption of our 100% renewable option, with over 170 customers choosing that, including businesses like Koenig Winery and Auberge du Soleil. So that's my overview of the program. I'd be happy to talk about anything in particular specifically and answer any questions. Thank you for having me.
Before I have Councilmember Mueller ask her technical questions, one that I wanted to ask you, how does this relate, or does it, to individual jurisdictions receiving credit for emission reductions? Because I know that we're all tasked with fairly aggressive greenhouse gas reductions. Is there any confusion in terms of who's reducing where and who gets credit for it when we're in this group plan?
No, there's no confusion. It's very specific that the electricity that's used within a jurisdiction counts towards emissions reductions goals. So, for example, the county of Napa reached their emissions reduction goals 8 years early, in large part because of MCE, and it's really easy for us to calculate that and provide information because we know what all the electricity usage is, we know the emissions factors, and we can provide that.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could, that provides a good segue to acknowledge that we have a number of representatives from the Go Green Team in tonight's audience to see this presentation. So I think it's a good opportunity to acknowledge and thank those citizens that are going to be working over the next part of the year on our initiatives and review, and thank them for their extra credit assignment by coming to the council meeting tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller?
Okay, my first question has to do, if you take one step and then go to the next step, that's $18,000. It just seems, I'm trying to understand what's that for, because you said it's rate analysis, but you only set your rates once a year. So you would be spending $18,000 to tell us what our rate's going to be for 1 year?
So the analysis is a not to exceed $18,000, and our more recent communities haven't spent anywhere near that. But what we need to do is do an analysis for each new community to make sure that including the new community wouldn't cause our entire service area to raise rates, wouldn't necessitate that we raise rates, and secondly, wouldn't impede our ability to reduce greenhouse gases. That's what the study is for, and it requires requesting electricity data for the entire jurisdiction from PG&E and analyzing it and running it through the models to make sure it meets those criteria.
But I thought you said you always set your rates just a little bit below PG&E, so.
We try to, yes. And this
trying to understand what someone's going to get for $18,000, but maybe we can come back to that a little bit because I have several questions. So when you said that that PG&E doesn't have very many carbon-free, or as much as, because you buy some, but not 100%. It just depends on which customer, how much they want. Mm-hmm. But their numbers too, because I'm pretty involved in the Environmental Quality Committee, and I know these carbon-free definitions are quite varied, and so I'm assuming you don't count any of their hydroelectric power plants, which by definition, don't count, but they generate no carbon. So that's how you probably got that very low number for PG&E, correct?
Right. For renewable energy, we use the state's definition of renewable energy, which doesn't include carbon-free. So that's what those numbers are.
Okay.
PG&E does have extensive large hydroelectric and nuclear energy.
Which don't generate.
Right, which are carbon-free,
Right.
but not counted by the state as renewable.
We're working on that.
Right, and so with that, they're much cleaner. With those resources, they definitely get bumped up if you're only counting those to about 58, 59%.
Maybe 60, yeah.
Yeah, and we're still a little bit higher than them, but it's a much closer comparison if you don't have if you include those resources.
Okay, so also the opt-out provision. So if we go this direction, we're automatically, with a vote of how many, telling all of our citizens that they're no longer PG&E customers, they're MCE customers. And to get out, they have to pay $5 if they're residents. Is that what you said?
So that's only after the enrollment period. So the 60 days before the enrollment date is set, we'll start sending enrollment notices. We'll do extensive outreach in the community to let people know that this is coming. If you don't want it, opt out. And then 60 days after, they'll still get enrollment notices. We'll still be available to have information in the community. That entire time, there's no cost to opt out for anybody.
And we know what people do with their mail, though, on a daily basis. So,
right.
Yeah.
Which is why we do try very hard.
Right.
As Jerry
I
said,
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of, so you said you had a couple local renewable projects. You're actually building electric supply. So, because right now you're really just a paper broker, pretty much, right? Isn't that how it works?
Right. We buy through long-term power purchase agreements, and then we sell them on the retail market.
Okay, so PG&E is really, we've been members of PG&E as long as I've been alive, so anybody else who's probably lived here too. So when you're part of PG&E and now you're kind of switching over, you're really buying from them and other places. So all this PG&E stuff that's in place that we've been paying for, infrastructure projects and all sorts of stuff that ratepayers are paying for, who's kind of left to pay for all that stuff if people kind of opt out and go with MCE? Because that stuff is not going to go away. They still have other customers and other projects and other commitments. I don't kind of understand that part.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The electricity market, actually, since deregulation in California, all electricity service providers like PG&E and MCE primarily buy power from third-party providers and then provide it to their customers. So PG&E does own about 30% of their power, but most of it they're also buying on the wholesale market and selling to customers. So pretty much everyone is operating that same way. And the infrastructure that you're talking about still falls under that delivery and transmission charge that you will still be paying to PG&E.
So you're not going to have trucks going around that say, MCE, or you're not going to have transmission lines. You're still just going to be like a office-based thing. Okay, so that brings me to my last question. Some of us are old enough to kind of remember 15 years ago when we had all this power grid problems and all that, when there was a new power broker company kind of in town. So what if you do fail? How is that kind of taken care of? Because you are kind of new, and we've kind of seen it before. How would that work? Who's on the hook for that?
So we post a bond at the California Public Utilities Commission in case of failure, but none of the communities are in any way liable for debt if we were to fail. There's a firewall in place, and every new community has looked at that and made sure that there's no liability on the behalf of the jurisdiction.
So it's really the county of Marin.
It's contained within the Joint Powers Authority that established Marin Clean Energy. So that's where all of it would rest. And that's why I like to start with the fact that CCA is a concept that's existed for a long time in other places, not California, but as long, but in the East Coast, it's been in existence for a really long time, so that people can get a sense that it's not as new as it seems here in California.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
Yeah,
Councilor
please.
Durham?
So your one slide showed an annual savings for business, $135, and homes, $51.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the idea too is we're making the right choice for the future in terms of using renewable energy instead of adding to greenhouse emissions as well. So we're making the right choice. Would you say that's true?
That's definitely our goal. We keep the savings in there because we know for a lot of people, your electricity bill, it's you're cost sensitive. You don't have a lot of flexibility for how much you pay. But for us, it's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We want to get as much renewable energy as we can in there because we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the future, build cleaner local projects for the future for cleaner, more local renewable energy.
So my other question was then nobody opts out and we all buy into it. You're purchasing this renewable energy because all of a sudden you have 5 cities on board, and so you can continue to supply that steep increase that's just happened then over the time as everybody sends in their letter of interest and pays the fee to do it, correct?
That we can continue to supply.
Provide to all those new people.
Right, and that's part of what the analysis is, to make sure that we can procure enough renewable energy to give the new communities the same amount of renewable energy at low competitive rates.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm one of the committee members of the Go Green team, so thanks to our colleagues for showing up and you for presenting. Question I have for you is, so, I look at this and I say, okay, great, most people, they get it. They're going to get a couple dollars a month reduction in their utility bill. But if you're someone who's contemplating putting solar on top of your house or putting it, in the big backyards that we all have in Yountville, the question I have is, you've now reduced my ability to have a payback on that solar implementation, because now theoretically, I'm now generating power at a lesser rate, if you will. So my payback is not quite as offset, correct?
I'm very glad that you brought this up because I love talking about our solar program, and we actually have some systems in place to make sure that we do have some added value for solar customers. So the first thing that we do is compensate solar customers at an extra penny. So most people like PG&E, when you produce more than you use, you get credited at retail rates. When you use more than you produce, you get charged at retail rates. Mm-hmm. So we charge at retail rates and credit at retail rate plus a penny.
Okay.
So even though what you're getting credited is less than if our rates were more expensive, you're paying less when you're using electricity, and you're getting that extra penny. So you get that added value.
Yeah, that's good.
And then also at the end of the year, we never zero out credits. So PG&E will do that in some cases. That never happens with MC. You always retain the full retail value of your credits. And you have the option to get a check for your credits if they exceed $100, which PG&E in some cases will compensate you at a reduced wholesale rate. But that full retail rate compensation is something that only NCE and Sonoma Clean Power are offering for customers.
And I guess with that in mind, if that were the case in the town, let's just say we were all to say, oh, yes, we'll buy into this, and this is a great idea, and I frankly, personally think it is one. But then the town decides that it's going to undertake a solar project as well. Is it eligible for those same rebates? Should that be put in place?
Right, yes. They're eligible for all of those net
They're a
energy
customer.
metering.
They're
Right.
technically a customer in that regard.
Right, for all those net energy metering, and also for all of the rebates, like the California Solar Initiative rebates, CSI rebates, those are all the same. They're not affected by MCE's service. So you're eligible for all the same discounts.
Plus you're selling back at an extra penny per whatever it is.
Exactly right. And that's part of like the local programs I talked about. That's what we spend what would be shareholder profits. we take that and we invest it back in those community programs so that we can give an extra benefit to our local communities with the money they pay for electricity.
Great. I think those are my only questions.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes, please. I just want to ask a clarifying question about the $18,000 for the study. From what I heard and what I understood is that the 5 municipalities that you're talking to would all participate in that study, and our share of the cost would be a share of the $18,000 based on our population. Is that correct?
Would be up to you all to decide how to share the cost of that study, but I think some kind of proportional measure like that would make sense for me, but it would be up to you all to decide.
I see. That's what I thought I understood.
You did hear that correctly, and what it is it's a not to exceed 18,000 for the member jurisdictions that would move forward. What would yet to be determined would be, is it 3,000 an agency? Is it proportionate? Those are the conversations that will happen with those that choose to go forward once we know that number. And I will also point out that a similar presentation was made to all of the, at the Napa City County Managers Group. So all of the cities are currently evaluating this, and their councils are being asked whether they want to look at. But what I would say is if we chose at a later point to go in on our own, we would still have to then pay an $18,000 analysis. So they're required by state law to do the analysis, and this is one of the requirements. So by partnering, we are actually being more financially proactive in saving money and doing it together.
And I have one last question, and that is that I believe I did receive an email a while ago that was quite critical of MCE. So would you, do you know of the criticisms and that have been leveled against MCE, and would you talk about those and put them to rest?
Any in particular, or just the ones that?
It was quite a while ago that I got that email, and I really can't remember the specifics. If there, perhaps it was just someone blowing air or steam off or something. But are you aware of limitations and things that you would, in all fairness, you would want us to know?
Well, the most common criticism that I hear doing community outreach is about the automatic enrollment process. People don't understand it right away sometimes, and it's important for us to explain it so they understand why it is that way. A lot of times I've run into some people for example, I was just doing outreach in Benicia who thought we were a for-profit company, and this was a way for us to get customers. So a lot of it is education, and that's why we really take the community outreach process very seriously. We want to, before people even get their enrollment notice, be out in the community talking to folks, explaining what the program is, how enrollment works, so that we don't get that reaction when they get the enrollment notice that they're getting pushed into something and they have to opt out. That's a common criticism that I hear.
And Allison, can you clarify, is that a PUC requirement?
It's the state law that created CCAs, so Assembly Bill 117. It's about being the default provider. So in a new community, they had to make a decision, the state, about whether or not a government that is part of a public power agency or a for-profit government-regulated entity should be what customers are automatically enrolled in. So for example, if someone new moves to the community, what would they be automatically enrolled in? And they chose the government entity. So that's why we are the default provider.
Well, thank you, Allison. I hope that wasn't an unfair question to ask you, but I appreciate your candor.
So I've got 3 areas question. We have the California Veterans Home as a third of our population, and we don't control that state facility and how it uses its power. I don't know that we can even require them to participate in a program that we do for the rest of our community. Can you speak to the relationship between a state controlled facility like the Veterans Home, and how, if we have jurisdiction, then we're basically telling them they have to switch over or opt out. Is it treated differently than any commercial or residential client, or do you know that one?
I believe that it does, if it's in the jurisdiction, even if it's in a separate area, that it would still get the enrollment notice and have an opportunity to opt out. But I can double check on that to make sure that that's the case.
You would run into that with the city of Napa and the state hospital. You're going to run into that if you haven't already.
The county?
Or the
buildings, even other state buildings.
Whether it's in the city or county,
Right.
those are the two largest that come to mind immediately. And the Vets Home is certainly the one that I would care about the most. So I would, that might be part of your study, but that would be something that would be really important for us to know before we go too far. How does, if at all, this new state regulation for solar permitting priority, that any solar project is mandatory to be given top priority for any permitting, does that factor into your solar service delivery or anything else? Does that affect your rate structure, or does it have no effect? It's brand new, so it may not have impacted you yet.
Right. So far, there's no impact that we foresee. We have the net energy metering system set up for solar customers, and we've had that since the beginning, and we continue to have it. I don't foresee any impacts of the legislation.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is it might actually benefit your service delivery because there may be additional projects within your jurisdictions that now are getting higher priority over all other applications because of this law that was passed in Sacramento. So just, again, something else to mention. But the last thing I wanted to ask about is the very real delivery concerns. We have challenges with PG&E outages, especially in the southern part of our town. And we struggle to find out why those outages happen sometimes. Sometimes it's obvious, like a down power pole, but sometimes it's not. And what I worry about is we already have a hard enough time pinning down PG&E on reinstituting power and finding the problem and fixing it. And now we're talking about having, if it's a down power pole, PG&E is still responsible for the delivery of the service. So now we're having to talk to you about the loss of the power and them about replacing the pole. That doesn't sound like a very efficient process.
So when we're providing electric generation, we're responsible to buy the power from third-party providers, put it onto the grid, and once it's on the grid, it goes entirely into that transmission, delivery, and billing that PG&E provides. So they would still be the only one that you'd need to contact if there were a power outage, or if there were tree trimming issues, if there was a problem with the meter. They really provide all the service. So really, it's just a matter on our end of sourcing cleaner power and getting it onto the grid. So other than community outreach about what we are trying to get people to understand more about renewable energy and the benefits, we don't have a lot of service issues that we talk to the community about. So it wouldn't add another layer of...
Okay. That would be concerned if there was another layer that we had to deal with, because the layer we have is already challenging. Those are my questions. I invite anybody from the public that's here tonight, green team or not, to ask any questions about the presentation. Seeing nobody coming forward. Yes, you may. Sure.
Councilmember Dornbecker, I really appreciated your question about past baggage, I think, with community choice energy programs and Pacific Gas and Electric. And I just want to say, as a partner of Pacific Gas and Electric, Sustainable Napa County runs a program in partnership with PG&E called Napa County Energy Watch. And we've been very successful getting into the community businesses and nonprofits and local governments to help them become more energy efficient using PG&E rebates and incentives, and we have a team approach. And what I have seen over the last year and a half since Napa County Unincorporated joined the program with Marin Clean Energy, there has been nothing but a sense of cooperation, collaboration between the MCE and the PG&E teams that are on the ground, that are dealing with programs every day. It's really more about how can we best serve the customer, and those are the questions that we're asking, regardless of delivery of the program, delivery of the resource, who owns it. How do we pick, again, from the toolbox, the best tools that we need to help the utility customer, however that is. And so we put all the pieces together kind of behind the scenes to make sure that the customer is being served in the highest quality, the best fashion possible, suited to their situation. And so the people that we're working with on a day-to-day basis at PG&E, along with the people at Marin Clean Energy, just trying to solve problems, find the best way to make sure that the communities are being served and getting that the power and the services that they need. And so we've been really thrilled because we think that the program in Napa County can really help redefine the way CCAs and PG&E work together, because it's been successful so far. And we've seen nothing but really great people just trying to do their job.
Thank you very much. Any further comment from the council? I think the direction being requested is to authorize a letter to be sent for further analysis, not requiring any financial commitment at this time.
That is
And the
correct,
letter-
and we've included a
proposed
draft
letter
letter.
is attached. Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Mueller?
My button disappeared after you joined. It seems like there is some time. You haven't made all your presentations yet. I guess this is, we would be basically, and we have several steps, I think, to take down the road. You know, signing up and really switching over everyone in our community to a new power service. They'll probably still think they're PG&E customers, but they're really not. I would like a little community outreach,
Well, I think
and so what I would like to suggest is that it's great that you came, but I think it would be really a democratic, fair way to have you guys come and your PG&E representatives come, and for our community to really hear about this, because then they can ask all these questions, become very aware of how you work together, but how you'll be separate before, you know, we really take a lot of steps without them really understanding this whole process. And I know you really feel that education outreach is important, so I think that should be kind of part of our steps to, you know, not everybody watches our town council meetings, you know, or reads the paper about what we're talking about, and it's kind of a big step. And so I think it's really would be fair, and we've had lots of questions. I think they'll have lots of questions, and I'd like for them to be able to embrace all this as well. So that's what I would like to add, that step.
Well,
Okay,
if I
Councilmember
might.
Dornbecker?
We have already discussed this in our Go Green team, the outreach to the community, and we certainly would want to include this for sure in that outreach. So this kind of program is definitely what we're looking for to talk to the community about, because it does reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So this is definitely on our agenda to bring this
But
forward.
all I'm saying is let's have PG&E there too, because, you know, you work together, you're kind of separate, you know, they're not going to be PG&E customers anymore. It's just a fair way to
I need to
present both
clarify
sides.
while we're doing that. One, I think the idea about, if the council chooses to move forward, I think it's a great idea to have a more engaged community workshop. My comment I want to make is, people still continue to be a PG&E customer. PG&E is responsible for the maintenance, the operation, the distribution, and the transmission system. The only thing the community aggregate provider is responsible for is the purchasing of the power. So I want to make sure people are still going to be, the PG&E employee is going to be the one coming to the house doing all of that work on your lines and stuff. There's no MCE employees that will be doing that. If there's an outage and all those things, those are all addressed because PG&E owns, and if you look on the chart up there, you'll see the
No,
line.
I fully
Okay,
understand
I
it.
just wanna make
I'm
sure
just saying
that-
they're not, they will have different rates. It will be
The
a
rate
different
structure,
customer,
correct.
you know, some of these mechanisms, but that's why having, this dual presentation to everybody.
No doubt. I just wanted to make
Really
sure
just
that-
education.
Got it. Councilmember Durham?
I agree with Councilmember Mulder completely. There's plenty of times where we walk down the street, and no matter how much community outreach we do in this community, unless you post that it's going to be a dog park with new sidewalks, not many people are going to show up. So I do agree that someone's going to come to us and say, why did you vote to change our energy? So I'm all for it. I will go for it in a second. But let's be straight. It's an opt-out. It's not an opt-in. So that was just my main concern as well. So I agree.
And just to be clear, tonight's action is not to.
But it's to take this-
sign up. What it is to ask for further information,
Correct.
which would
To take the
potentially
next step.
include this dual relationship
Yeah.
between PG&E
And
and MC.
that is correct, Mayor. This is really just a very preliminary, and then we will hear back from Marine Clean Energy as to whether that is something that actually can work. So we're many months before we would go, and we certainly have the opportunity to ensure that there's a community workshop with Marine Clean Energy and PG&E present so that everybody can discuss that.
And we can't lose sight of the timeliness, if there is interest in moving forward, that we collaborate with jurisdictions so that it would make no sense for us to foot the bill for an $18,000 study just in Yountville. So that would be
again,
the most
right.
timely,
And
time-sensitive issue. I
The
think.
first thing is there interest from the council? Because if there's not, there's no requirement that the council do anything. This
So
is really,
is there interest in having a no-cost letter sent to Marine Clean Energy to find out additional information?
That's for
If
me,
so,
yes.
I would welcome a motion to be
I'll make a
presented.
motion.
I made a motion that we should go ahead and move forward with drafting a letter to MCE that we have interest.
Well, a letter has been drafted. If I
the
could
council.
ask that your
I read
motion
that,
would
yeah.
be to have the town manager's letter sent to Marine Clean Energy as it's presented in the staff report.
So moved.
I see Vice Mayor Hall moves that.
I'll second.
You push the button.
I've already got
Councilmember
it.
Dornbecker seconded, even though it's not in there yet.
Well, I already have
That's all right.
my vote just
That's
went to
okay.
yes, and I didn't even touch it.
I did it because you motioned.
Oh, thank you.
Let's call for the motion, please.
Okay, so we have the motion from Vice Mayor, seconded by Councilmember Dornbecker, and please cast your vote. And this, again, is just to send a letter for further information. We're back to our unanimous votes.
Thank God.
After one. Okay, thank you, and thank you both for your presentations. Appreciate it very much, and thank you also to our green team for continuing to find new and better ways for us to be energy efficient. Appreciate it.
Need that straight up or after your? It's going to be after, okay. So, I'm running to the restroom. No.
I'm going to just slowly move us on to the next item since we are missing one council member temporarily. And now we're missing our town clerk, so. All right, so we're going to be moving on to discussion and consideration for adoption of our town Updated Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. And before I forget, I want to just, I'll mention this again when we have public comment on this item, but we did receive 3 e-comments regarding this item, and I do see that we have a couple of our e-commenters here live, as well as a third comment by a member who is not here. But I'm going to wait and get into those once we start the item. Joe, do you think we can go ahead and get started on this item without part of our staff? Actually, I think we need to wait for Councilmember Durham to hear the beginning of your presentation.
All right. We can wait either way.
He left without a hall pass.
I gave him one. He just didn't want to broadcast it. The need for one.
Inexcused absence. So with our full council back in attendance, if we'd like to start this item with the staff report, please.
Absolutely. Tonight we have, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, for your consideration, adoption, and approval of the town's Updated Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. The American with Disabilities Act, ADA, is a comprehensive civil rights law for persons with disabilities in both employment and the provision of goods and services. The ADA said its purpose is to provide a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. Congress emphasized that the ADA seeks to dispel stereotypes and assumptions about disabilities and to assure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. The ADA self-evaluation and transition plan is being prepared to partially fulfill the requirements set forth in Title II of the ADA. The ADA states that a public entity must reasonably modify its policies, practices, or procedures to avoid discrimination against people with disabilities. This report will assist the town of Yountville to identify the policy, program, and physical barriers to accessibility and to develop barrier removal solutions that will facilitate the opportunity to access to all individuals. The development of a transition plan is a requirement of the federal regulations implementing the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which requires that all organizations receiving federal funds make their programs available without discrimination towards people with disabilities. The act has become known as the Civil Rights Act of Persons with Disabilities, and it states, no otherwise qualified handicapped individual in the United States shall solely by reason of handicap be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Congress passed the ADA Act on July 26, 1990. Title II of the ADA program covers activities and services of public entities. The Department of Justice's Title II regulation adopts general prohibitions established under Section 504 and incorporates prohibitions of discrimination for ADA. Title II provides protections to individuals with disabilities that are at least equal to those provided by the non-discrimination provisions of Title V of the Rehabilitation Act. Specifically, the town may not, either directly or through contractual arrangements, do any of the following. They cannot deny persons with disabilities the opportunity to participate as members of advisory boards and commissions, deny persons with disabilities the opportunity to participate in services, programs, or activities that are not separate or different from those offered others, even if the town offers permissibly separate or different activities. In determining the location of facilities, they must make selections that have the effect of excluding or discriminating against persons with disabilities. Title II of the ADA provides that public entities must identify and evaluate all programs, activities, and services, and review all policies, practices, and procedures that govern administration of the entity's programs, activities, and services. This report and certain documents incorporated by reference establishes the town's ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. Furthermore, a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling requires the addition of public sidewalks to a town's ADA transition plan. In June 2002, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision on Barden v. Sacramento, ruling that public sidewalks are a service program or activity within the meaning of Title II Americans with Disabilities Act. As such, sidewalks are subject to the self-evaluation and transition plan requirements applicable to programs under the ADA regulations and accessibility guidelines. In effect, Barden v. Sacramento requires a public entity conduct a self-evaluation and prepare a transition plan for public sidewalks. Through the process of, in preparing the the self-evaluation transition plan, the town's plan included public meetings and outreach. The purpose of these meetings were to encourage members of the public, including persons with disabilities, to share their comments regarding the preparation of the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. The first meeting was held on October 3rd, 2013. This meeting included some suggestions to revise the plan, especially in the Washington Park neighborhood. Staff, along with our consultant MIG, revised the plan and presented the revised self-evaluation transition plan in 2 meetings on June 21st, 2015. First meeting was scheduled to address the specific Washington Park concerns and comments, and the second meeting was used to present the complete ADA self-evaluation transition plan for the townwide plan. The ADA self-evaluation and transition plan will give staff the guiding documents and policy to use in their decision-making for future CIP and other improvements as they relate to the ADA program. We're asking you to adopt and approve the town's updated Americans with Disabilities Act, Self-Evaluation and Transition Program this evening. We also have two representatives from MIG who are going to do a short presentation for you this evening, and then I'll follow up with an additional short set of slides on the Washington Park neighborhood and some other particulars as they can pertain to the law regarding our ADA program and our community. So I think with that.
Let me just first, before you start, any specific questions for the council on the staff report so far? No? Okay. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, and it's really great to be here, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff. We've been working together for the last couple of years with your fabulous staff, I have to say that right off the bat, in developing this document. It's a pretty substantial piece of work, and it's not just a building kind of evaluation. As many people think of the Americans with Disabilities Act as a building-related federal law that dictates parking spaces and wide stalls in the bathroom, but in fact it is a civil rights law, as the Public Works Director points out. So I think that's an important, I'm going to try to get rid of
just
that.
Just a normal forward click.
Pardon?
It's just a left click in order to advance the slide.
Oh, left. Sorry. There we go. So the ADA does cover all aspects of life in this United States. As employees or employers, we're covered under the ADA under Title I. Title II of the ADA covers public entities like the town of Yountville. Other public agencies are covered under this segment. We'll talk a little bit about that particular title, which is the most important one for this self-evaluation and transition plan, but also the private sector entities, nonprofits and private sector entities are covered as well under Title III. Slightly different requirements for them. They must do what is readily achievable with their existing buildings in order to make them accessible. You have an obligation of making your programs and services accessible, a slightly different mandate, and that is covered in our document here. Telecommunications Title IV and a miscellaneous title that deals with federal agencies, but we're here to deal with, is that right? Again, left. Okay, so it is, as I mentioned, primarily an obligation to provide programs, activities, and services in an accessible way, and we'll talk about how that works. This document covers the two aspects of the ADA that you're obligated to address, and those are a self-evaluation of programs and policies, kind of the non-facility side of the equation, and then also the facility side, which is the transition plan, which ultimately translate into what do you have to do with your physical environments in order to make your programs and activities accessible to members of the public. So this document addresses both. The self-evaluation was accomplished by looking at the municipal code. Nothing really too surprising or shocking in the municipal code. A lot of old language. We have to make sure we're now addressing service animals, for instance. Dogs are now defined as service animals. No other animal is a service animal. Other than miniature horses under certain circumstances. The 2010 ADA did clarify and qualify that. And so we looked at the municipal code, not a whole lot there. But we also administered a questionnaire to town staff, which was really helpful, I think, not only for us to understand the current status of service provision for members of the public who have visual, hearing, cognitive, or mobility impairments. Want to make sure that the accessibility of town programs is, there and obvious to them. It also helped, I think, staff understand their obligations under the ADA, because we asked questions like, do you provide your written materials in alternative formats so if a person who has a visual disability can get that information? So do you provide large print or braille if need be, electronic format? So the very questions that we asked, I think, were informative, and all those comments and recommendations are summarized in this document as well. So this is meant to be a tool kit, kind of a resource guide for staff as well as the facility side. It's very helpful for staff. That was the self-evaluation report. In terms of translating it into physical environments, the town and every public agencies has important options here because it is a program-driven mandate. You can either make alterations to a facility to remove physical barriers, or you can relocate activities in order to provide access to those programs that are provided. In other words, not every conference room in a building has to be accessible. You must have accessible conference rooms. You can relocate activities. If you have a set of bathrooms in a facility that don't meet the obligation of the building portion of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you have another set of restrooms that do, you can put a sign at the older bathrooms directing people to the accessible restrooms. This is not something you can do with new construction or alterations, however. You're obligated to make any modifications to the buildings fully compliant with the current state and federal codes. But for existing buildings, you can use this programmatic test in order to make sure your programs are accessible, or provide auxiliary services to assist an individual. That might be like having the assistive listening device that would help a member of the audience hear better with if they have a hearing issue. They can put on a wireless headset to turn the volume up. That's an auxiliary service that can be provided. So a lot of this is actually done with people, kind of people skills, and I think that's the important thing here, that your staff demonstrated in the self-evaluation portion of this process that they are ready, willing, and able to come to the assistance of a person with a disability, and I think that's an important step in providing services to members of the public. We also, as part of this process, because there is an obligation to remove physical barriers when they are in fact barriers to program access or services, that we did a comprehensive evaluation of all the city town facilities, parks, public buildings, and you are really lucky to have some great facilities in this town. Your recent renovated spaces, just like this room itself, town hall, community center, the library, other elements of the town are very well done. Your parks. When we were doing these evaluations, as soon as we would provide a draft report to the town manager, we would be getting calls from maintenance staff and facility staff saying, now, we want to get that done right now. There was no waiting until this report was done and approved by the council. The action started happening at that same time. So that was very kind of good for us to hear that there was a lot of support from the top and everywhere else here in the town to get this work done. But the physical survey, which is contained in these appendices, identifies barriers based on not only the federal requirements, but also the California State Building Code, which is quite rigorous as well. So obviously you need to identify the barriers based on both sets of codes. Those are listed in here with the citations of the code. A solution for removing the barrier is provided, and a planning level cost estimate is provided to help the town plan for the removal of barriers. So some of the common barriers, and let me just say there were not a lot of major barriers in your facilities. Most things were fairly maintenance level projects. Pedestrian walks, now this one does include a little more. With crosswalks exceeding 2%, there is a requirement that sidewalks and paths of travel don't have any more than a 2% cross slope on them. That makes it difficult for people in wheeled mobility devices like wheelchairs or walkers or even crutches, because as our hips adjust for walking on a slope, but a wheeled mobility device has to maneuver on that slope and can be difficult. So that was something that I think every community is dealing with in terms of public walkways, that cross-slope issue. I'm just listing some of the common issues. Doors that are slightly hard to open because of the door pressure required. That can be affected by wind and internal pressures from a heating and ventilating system. Restroom dispensers, which are too high, that's more of a maintenance issue, and those are the kinds of things that got handled almost immediately when we would deliver a report. Signage, exit signs that now have like the exit route sign next to this door that has a braille and tactile component to it, so people who are blind or low vision can find the right door to go out. They're not trying to go through a closet door when the fire alarm goes off. Things like that. And the recreation facilities, standards have just changed. In 2010, the ADA for the first time established guidelines for recreation facilities like sports fields, swimming pools, other recreation things that never were covered by any kind of a building code or accessibility standard. So those are now in place, and you do have recreation facilities here, and we identified some of the things like a lack of a path of travel to a half-court basketball court in one of the smaller parks, or some smaller things like that, mostly path of travel to elements. But those are things that can be done fairly easily. You know, like I said, we did not find major facilities, no steps up into buildings with no ramps, for instance. There might be a ramp, but it might have a handrail that's slightly too low or something like that. But that's drinking fountains. Now we have to have two drinking fountains, a wheelchair accessible drinking fountain and one that is higher for people who have a difficulty bending over to that lower fountain. So as codes change, of course, people we have to kind of keep up with those standards. So that's an issue as well. Categorizing the barriers, given that we had a kind of a laundry list of barriers, how do we categorize them and develop them into a strategic plan for removing barriers to programs? One is within a building itself, making sure that you're looking initially at the basic access into the building. This is the logic of access. Have basic access into the building or the park or the recreation facility, then the removal of barriers that improve access to the programs that are provided in that building. In the building, in the town hall here, it's really access to the front counter so that people can come to the counter and take care of their business. We were not concerned in this document, in this title, with employee spaces, because this is about access to the public, not Title I. This is a Title II document, so we looked at those areas. And then finally, amenities like drinking fountains, things that are not critical to the use of that facility, vending machines, things like that. Or then finally, areas that are not required to be modified because there's an option of directing people to a more accessible location. So those are the kind of criteria that we applied to the barriers. We also looked at the entire list of town facilities and did a workshop with staff leadership and looked at the level of public use of town facilities, whether those facilities contain unique programs or services where you really can't relocate an activity. It's the only place. This is the only town council meeting room, so this is the one that needs to be accessible. And in fact, it is in many ways. I believe this podium goes up and down. You have a ramp to access the dais, and the restrooms and everything about the public access to this building and space is compliant with the ADA. And then things like geographic distribution, or if there are identified complaints, other criteria that the staff felt was important to help craft a schedule of removing barriers in facilities was developed. And ultimately, a transition plan table was established on a 12-year basis that talked about town facilities, town parks, town open spaces, and facilities where town programs are provided in leased facilities. So that was really a strategic plan. By the way, all of the information in this document, including the facility reports, is contained also in an Excel spreadsheet. This is a big paper document done on a database, but for the use of staff, it's been translated into an Excel spreadsheet that can be used to monitor and report the removal of barriers. So this is not just a paper update of a slice in time, but an opportunity, a tool that can be used to produce an annual report. So if asked, what are you doing to remove barriers to town facilities, that there's now a mechanism in which to do that reporting. We think that's very important. Well, we feel that, as I mentioned, this will not only be a tool for town staff, But it also has been a bit of an eye-opener for town customer service staff, that people now, I think, have a little better idea how to accommodate the needs of people with visual, hearing, mobility, cognitive issues, and so forth. So I think that's important. And it does identify the barriers in detail, and it does establish a timeline for moving forward. Now, the timeline is very flexible, and this really the document really reiterates the flexibility that has to be contained in that timeline, because we're not saying that door will be fixed on, October 5th. We're saying barriers in this facility will be addressed within a time frame of these particular high priority ones, the first 3 years, years 1 through 3 or 4 through 7 or 8 through 12, so in categories like that. And if priorities change, if funds are available to renovate a facility or do some work in a facility, of course that will help change. So you're not approving a hard and fast timeline with fixed dates for the improvement of specific facility. It's more of a framework schedule for removing barriers in facilities. So we also addressed the accessibility of the public right-of-way, and this, as Public Works Director mentioned, this Barden versus Sacramento case about sidewalks. It did add sidewalks into the mix of public pedestrian environments, curb ramps and sidewalks. So we looked at all of the streets that have public sidewalks. You're not obligated to build a sidewalk. That may be an obligation in other town policies for development, but the ADA does not say you must build sidewalks. It says if you have sidewalks, here are the conditions that those sidewalks have to meet. So that's important. That's important. So we did look at those. Those are also contained in our reports. And Washington Park indeed was part of our project and our evaluation. But this document does not dictate or mandate a particular action in Washington Park. It states that further study is required to find an appropriate solution for addressing pedestrian access within the Washington Park subdivision. So I think this document represents a comprehensive look at both the policies, programs, activities, and services, and the facilities where we've determined that physical changes might be needed to remove barriers to those programs. So with that brief overview of a very complicated law and obligation, I turn it over, I think, to Joe, who's going to talk a little bit more about the public right-of-way.
Actually, Tim, just one thing, if you could share before Joe goes into a little bit more detail. Can you just explain generally how the courts have looked at successfully how important the ADA transition plan, that a community have a valid, accepted transition plan? Because in my experience, in prior organizations, when we've had a valid transition plan and we can show that we've been making adequate and significant progress, one, that we're current and that we have a game plan, the courts have generally found that is a more helpful defense when there has been litigation, because this town has been sued before and was able to successfully defend itself because we did have a valid ADA transition plan. I just wondered if you might be able to share that a little bit with the council and the community.
Well, I can, and I think that's exactly right. We don't really like to think of people with disabilities as risks to manage, but in fact there is risk management here. It is an important element to make sure that you do have a proactive plan, and you are required to have a self-evaluation and transition plan. And not only to have it, but also to show that you're making progress towards implementing it. So I think that's the important thing, and I think that's something that town staff is very clear about, that this is a working tool now to help go forward. But communities that do have a current ADA self-evaluation transition plan and can show their action and engagement, and you are asked now to adopt the plan, which I think is a very good thing. Some communities have not been so forward, and they've only accepted the report of the consultant. So I think this is an important statement, and I think it serves you well to adopt this plan. I think it's a solid. This is the work I do. I'm a certified access specialist in the state of California. I've done 75 or 100 of these over the course of my career. I've done Marin County's plan, Sonoma County's plan, most of the cities, city of Napa, city of Petaluma. Many plans in the area, and I can say that the engagement of your staff has been very, very good and very, I think, positive. So this is not a plan that has been done just to have a plan. This is a plan that has been done to exemplify and to kind of move the town forward, and in a risk management sensitive. But I think more importantly, a customer service sensitive way. So I just want to report that about our experience as a consultant working with your staff. So that's it. I don't know if there's anything else. But Joe, you have some words you'd like to say about?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, let me just ask if the council has any specific question of our presenter. Nope. Great. Thank you very much.
No, I would like to say thank you both to Tim and Ashley from MIG. I think this was a pretty comprehensive document. They definitely helped us craft something that was sensitive to the concerns and comments that we have had from the community and represent the unique challenges that we had within town here. So thank you to both of them for helping us get to that. So we have a few additional slides on the Washington Park neighborhood and some of the laws that surround what we're trying to accomplish here and manage some of our risk. The Americans with Disabilities, that wasn't the first slide that I had, but
Start with that one.
I guess we could. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a civil rights law that mandates equal opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Title, as you've heard before, Title II, that is not the...
That's not the right
slide.
slide.
That I had. Hold on, let me see if I can forward you the right one. I apologize. We were kind of hard at it right till the end, so who should I send that to? Nathan?
If you just know where it's saved.
It's not saved to...
What we've prepared, and I have to actually acknowledge the work of some of the Washington Park residents, because they suggested that we try to put together an outline of facts, timelines, and some information to help explain some of the circumstances. There we are.
Okay.
And we've attempted to do that because we understand and we've listened, as the council knows, quite extensively. So Joe and I will do a tag team approach so that first, Washington Park's first phase was approved by the town council in 1996, and the approval documents included decomposed gravel and DG, and it was built with the intent to mimic Old Town. In 1997, the town council approved the residents' request at that time from the very first phase to change and get rid of the decomposed gravel because they did not like a lot of the tracking and the issues. So many residents have said they've always had asphalt, and that's correct. All of the future phases of the O'Brien development were built with asphalt, but the very first phases, the very first homes had the DG, and more importantly, the town council approved the development plan for the project with the DG. Also significant to footnote is that in 1998, the town actually contributed public funding to remove and replace the DG with a paved asphalt project.
In 2012, microservicing was completed on the streets and shoulders. I think it's important to note that that while we're in this transition plan, had we not been heading in this direction, a microsurfacing would have triggered a full-blown ADA mandated change to the neighborhood. So with absent of this transition plan, it is policy and regulation for most communities to then use that trigger to make the neighborhood ADA compliant. So that would have required a whole bunch of additional work that we are now trying to transition through and find a solution
right.
to.
And what I would just clarify on that, the ADA law says that when you alter or modify, for example, when we renovated this building, we had to become fully compliant. The ADA and state law have, through the Department of Justice, have now determined what types of construction projects constitute construction. And microsurfacing, they have determined, is a construction, and therefore when you microsurface, you need to be in ADA compliance or have an approved ADA transition plan with an approved game plan. Now, this is important because in two areas. One, we will be wanting to resurface or microsurface this neighborhood shortly. They'll be scheduled in several years for that treatment, just like we've done a major microsurfacing throughout town this year. And I think it's also important to note that this town council and prior town councils have been more, I think they've had a strong track record of ADA transition plan compliance and monitoring, in part because they recognize both the senior age of the population in our community, the accessibility issues, and our proximity for the veterans home. So this has been something that the town has had a very positive track record towards accessibility and doing probably more. We're more focused on that. And also just recently, this summer, we completed the existing DG paths in the Washington Park neighborhood. And prior, for those of you that remember, the Vineyard path that used to be an asphalt and DG has been replaced. We've also been doing that not only in Washington Park, but I just want to make sure that everybody in the community knows we've done that in Vineyard View Park, and we've done that in Veterans Park, and we've completely renovated and done in an ADA accessible manner all of the paths in Veterans Memorial Park. We've also really focused on additional accessible path linkage, including the missing link on North Yount, so that the east side of Yount Street is now an accessible ADA path all the way from Yountville Crossroad all the way down. And we're currently working, we finished a gap on South Washington at the Catholic Church so that people will be able to have an accessible path all along Washington from the south end of town to the north end of town.
If you could speak very briefly on the difference between some of the sidewalks that are private property and how those have avoided the requirements that the public access has, in particular along Washington Street. If you're on the east side of Washington Street, most or all of the sidewalks are the town's responsibility. On the west side, several portions of those are private property.
I also think that's a good clarification, and what we'll also see, though, is we've been using any opportunity when a new project comes in, all of those, the town has the affirmative obligation to bring them into ADA compliance. So, for example, when the Heston project came in on that location, all of those sidewalks and pathways are accessible, and we're currently working with the ownership of Edward James Plaza on an ADA accessible path. So you're absolutely correct.
There are still segments, especially along Washington Street, that are private property where the town is encouraged but cannot require compliance by the private property owners, but they're the ones that are liable.
Right, that is correct. And there's also potentially a liability issue in Washington Park. But to your point, we have two opportunities. One, and again, this comes to what is known as a triggering event. So when a private property owner wants to do something different, that triggers the ability for us to require them to bring the path or the sidewalk into full compliance, or if the maintenance of the path is in such a condition that it needs to be repaired. For example, there have been some improvements. So a good example would be recently we actually partnered with the Crossroad Condos community and replaced their really kind of maintenance-worn asphalt sidewalk, and that's been replaced. So you're absolutely correct. There is a responsibility of the private property owner to have that, and the town has identified and is working with all of those property owners to bring them into compliance or put them on notice that when a project comes forward, they'll need to be fully compliant.
There were several ADA issues that brought this particular challenge up onto our radar. In 2012, 4 citizens complained about access and safety. I believe there were...
Actually, we have received 4 complaints. Often people say, well, what's the issue? There's constructive notice, and I'll let our attorney identify more what's constructive notice, but we have had 4 communications from individuals that have either said, we think this is a problem, or I've had an issue, I had an injury and something, and I want you to be aware of it, and please do something to fix it.
That included some opinions from Parsac regarding new case law. Again, kind of codifying what we've already heard this evening about the responsibility of the entity, town, agency, or private property owner to address sidewalks that are non-compliant.
And I'm going to let John chime in, because one of the things some of the residents have asked is, well, do we really have to do this? Is that just an opinion? And the town, at the council's request, you asked us, and we went out and received external engineering reports and an additional outside legal counsel report.
So good evening again, John DiCristina, Assistant Town Attorney. So this first slide just again throws up some of the general points about the Americans with Disabilities Act that you've heard already, that it is a civil rights act for persons with disabilities, and that it does apply to sidewalks. Based on the facts that have been related to you, I'm going to cover 2 aspects of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, that apply to the Washington Park situation. Next slide, please. So there are 2 issues here. First is that any new construction or alterations to city facilities since January 26, 1992 have to be fully ADA compliant. An alteration, as we've heard, includes resurfacing a street or a sidewalk. And second, again, the Barden case has been cited a few times, but that generally obliges the city to maintain sidewalks accessible to persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. So, as we've heard, this area was changed from gravel to asphalt in 1998, and that was a new construction. At the very least, it was certainly an alteration in the usability of this area, but it was a new construction too. And then in 2012, the microsurfacing and the any future microsurfacing will be alterations, resurfacing of the road and the sidewalk. In sum, the town has taken action since 1992 on these city facilities that invoke the ADA. Next slide, please. And the reason it's so important is because these really are sidewalks. Under the law, I don't think you can really argue persuasively that they are not sidewalks, that they are meant for another purpose. And here we would look to the vehicle code, which provides a few definitions that are relevant here. First, it defines highways and streets the same way. It says a highway or a street is a way or a place of whatever nature publicly maintained and open to the use of the public for purposes of vehicular travel. So that's highway or street for vehicular travel. In distinction to that, a sidewalk is the portion of the highway other than the roadway set apart by curbs, barriers, marking, or other delineation for pedestrian travel. In this case, we have a raised area set apart from the portion that is dedicated to vehicular travel. It is clearly not dedicated to vehicular travel. It has in fact been used as a pedestrian walkway. It is separated by a physical barrier, a curb. This is a sidewalk under the law. This is my opinion. This is the opinion of other council who have presented opinions on this very subject to the town. It is most definitely a sidewalk under the law, and under Barden, the town is obliged to maintain this sidewalk in a way that makes it accessible to persons with disabilities. And that is separate and apart from the fact that these were constructed and altered since 1992. The point of the transition plan is to identify aspects of town facilities that are not ADA compliant. These sidewalks are not ADA compliant, and therefore the transition plan addressed them to ensure that the town has a game plan moving forward to address this issue.
John, if I may, before you
Of
proceed, so one of the arguments has been people use them to park their vehicles, either partially or wholly on what you've now clearly defined as a sidewalk. And can you just address that doesn't change the definition of the sidewalk from the legal perspective? It just means that people are using that sidewalk to park their vehicle.
That's correct. And past uses do not change the legal definition of this area as one would apply it under the ADA. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide.
All right. And I think this is an important one because, as was alluded to by Tim Gilbert today, the adoption of the ADA transition plan is not adopting a fixed solution or recommendation or plan for Washington Park. We've been working in a contemporaneous way with them, contemporary, I should say, going on with this process so that they had an idea of what we were trying to do. And I think we're making good progress, and I think we had an improvement. The town staff certainly started with a rather holistic approach that was not well received by the residents, and we've heard that. We've listened, and we've taken almost a year and a half to try to better evaluate and understand that. The town has developed a couple drafts of some hybrid solutions. What we're trying to focus on is something that will connect and create that ADA accessible path network. You saw the picture with the gaps, and you can see the gaps that we have in Washington Park. We think that there are only a few areas that we have to focus on, and if we do that, that will allow us to maintain as much parking as possible. Now, I will share with you, we have some risk on whether parking needs to be ADA accessible, but we're willing to work right now on a hybrid solution that will maintain as much parking as possible while creating a network, because we heard loud and clear from the neighborhood. And I will point out that they want us to minimize the amount of sidewalk, not side lack. So that's a interesting typo. But anyway, we heard from them that could we keep this to the minimum? And for those of you that are familiar, Washington Park has a unique access route. It has an internal center path system, and then it has the paved and concrete systems that come around the Vineyard View and then on connecting to Staggs. So we think, Staggs View, I should say. So we think there's a smaller scale amount. We need to address town-owned liability issues. The town is a property owner. And as such, we need to make sure that the property we own and maintain meets ADA compliance, because we have the potential for being sued. So one of the first things we will take and look at is getting our own house in order. So that is why we will be looking at Forester Park and Three Weir. Our goal there is simply to keep the existing parking, add an ADA spot in each location so that we can show that ADA accessible parking is generally provided, and we'll adjust the ADA curb ramp and access into Forester Park to align up, and we'll do a similar one simply accessing so that in rebuilding the path at Three Weir that goes to the bridge. We think that in listening to some of the neighborhoods, that could be a good outcome. That will be a network entry spot, and maybe we can stop at that point for the time being and say we're providing neighborhood access. So we're trying to address that. We're trying to come up with a hybrid solution that is also going to be legally defensible, because ultimately we have to look at the responsibility for the town-wide compliance. And then the adoption of the ADA transition plan confirms in writing the commitment that the town has made to be working with a neighborhood ad hoc committee. So with that, and we'll be using this, we do have an interest list from the Washington Park residents that are interested in an ad hoc committee, and we've communicated in our more recent communications to them that we will start that more earnest discussion in August after the council's adopted or provided direction on what they would like us to do with the ADA transition plan.
Is that it for the presentations?
I-
We'll do it. Yep.
Yeah, the other thing I will say.
No other staff want to kick in on the, and we only got 3 of you.
Right, no, the only thing we were just trying to identify, and I want to make sure that the Washington Park residents know that we are listening, and we're taking to heart a lot of their considerations, and we've heard from some folks, but we also have to acknowledge there are some folks that have sent us communications that say, I would like to walk on a sidewalk through the neighborhood. And we're trying to come up with something that can be scalable, defensible, and work with the neighborhood on something that is hopefully a better solution. And I think where we're at right now is it's proof that working and participating in the public process can improve the process, because we're doing something completely different than what was envisioned 2 years ago, and I think that outcome is going to be a better product because the public input and process, even though the public input and process at all times is not easy, but I do think it's the right way to do that, and I want to thank the Washington Park residents that are participating and helping to make sure that we're going to get a solution, and thank them for their involvement.
Thanks. Any questions of any of our staff presentations from the council? Vice Mayor, go ahead.
So, thank you all for the presentation. I'm a little confused, not about the construct or the amount of information that was poured into the Washington Park ADA component of the draft document, or I'm not even sure what we call it anymore. We should be called the Washington Park document. All I've heard tonight is about Washington Park. Do we have a summary of what the remainder of the document indicates? I mean, I find it a little distressing that we focused on one area of town, it's my personal opinion, in this presentation tonight. And I think that the staff owes it to not just the council but the community to indicate what the entire ADA transition plan is. And so I'm grateful for the presentation. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying, but we focused on one element or one area of town. I think it's short-sighted.
I think you're correct on the presentation, and we want to make sure the appendix and the charts that were showed in illustration, we show a number of areas that we need to be working on, and I just have to point out, to your point, it's all in the document that you received as an attachment.
268 pages.
That is correct. The summary, there are, in short, we have additional areas in the neighborhood that we need to be working on ADA curb cut transitions. We have some programming areas that we need to be addressing. We have some additional modifications in our buildings that we need to be doing, and those are all identified, and we've put in phasing to do that.
I'm confident of that. I don't know that the public should be. We haven't done anything other than present 270 pages of something that we didn't talk about, other than one specific area of town. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think we should expect that of our staff.
One thing I will point out is the public hearings that were held by staff were attended almost exclusively by Washington Park residents, and the issues were only brought up as they related to Washington Park neighborhood. The opportunity was certainly there for any other residents to come and express their concerns about the draft plan. None was brought forward, to my knowledge.
I'm confident the data is there. I just am not overwhelmed by the presentation that it was focused in one area of the community. That's my opinion, and you asked me for comment, and that's what it is.
Technically, I asked you for questions.
Sorry. My question is there any presentation on the rest of the town and what we're doing?
If I can, I think that our consultants were presenting that part of the plan, and they were trying to explain that the programs and the policies that are going to help us get to compliance with the ADA transition plan are included in their part of the presentation. Actually, in this year's CIP, there are a significant amount of improvements that were basically recommended and dictated by the ADA transition plan, for instance, Yountville Community Park.
Community Park. There's lots of wonderful
Veterans
areas
Park.
to pat ourselves on the back in. We didn't take an opportunity to do that or present it.
The Path on Mission that's going to be installed here August 17th. That's going to go under construction. So there are many, many, many projects that the council has looked at, that staff has brought forward, that are part and parcel of this transition plan, and that are identified and included as a result of the many, many hours of time that staff and our consultants have spent crafting this plan. And you're right. We talked a lot about Washington Park this evening and in the past, and it was driven a lot by the comments that we had from that neighborhood. I will say that when we did have that meeting on June 21st, Washington Park was well represented, and when they were done, the room emptied out, and it was the four of us kind of sitting here, the two consultants and staff, so, and Councilmember Dornbacher. So, thank you for allowing us to pat all of our, the council needs to be patted on the back as well for having a very aggressive CIP program. I've been in quite a few agencies that didn't have the same healthy appetite for improving parks and making them accessible, and I think it is well appreciated by the community, and it is represented in this plan.
And I will take responsibility, and I will ask you to move to page 72. I think, Richard, you're bringing up, and I understand and appreciate the fact that we have a 270-page document and the focus has been on 2 pages. So what I will point out is if you can catch up to page 72.
So just realize, Steve, that the electronic page is different than the printed page numbers.
I am referring to hopefully the electronic page, because that's where I'm finding it as well.
What
it
is it
starts
you're
showing
referring
there is a matrix chart.
That's on page 67, printed, 72 electronic then.
Correct. And again, what I want to share with everybody, because I think Councilmember Hall, our Vice Mayor Hall, you are correct. We have a lot of things that we've looked at and will be funding, and I will share with you, they include improvements in the way it's identified. You'll see several pages of the facility or the program, and you will see a breakdown, and you will see the barrier, and you'll see a target year for us to work on it. And I'm just, because you're right, we owe it, and I'll take responsibility for letting people know that we're looking at everything, and we're going to talk a little bit more about everything. So I will address that. So we are including Town Hall. Town Hall has just a few little things that we need to do, mostly be buttoned up. Yountville Community Center and Library, minor modifications. Yountville Community Hall, minor modifications.
Yes.
Post office is a town-owned building, so we have a few issues with the post office. Corporation Yard, you're already working on the Corporation Yard. As you know, we're doing a renovation and update project. Town parks. Now here, we've identified something in every park, because some of those have path walkways and surfaces, benches, curb ramps. So we've gone through every park, and you'll note that all of our parks, the majority of our parks are a first priority because of their general accessibility and use by everybody. Toyin Terrace is a priority 2 lot because that's generally there, but we have some things that we're working on, but they're minor, they're benches, refuse container. But you will see curb ramps in several areas, because in some areas we have existing ramps that do not meet current standards. There's nothing more frustrating to me than having to replace something, but when we alter or move into that project, we will have to bring those to compliance. You will note that, again, we've got the remaining gaps on Washington Park, access route, Wayside Stop, Hopper Creek Path, we're working on that. Heather Street open space, Oak Circle open space. We also have our own programs. For example, we lease facilities from Wine Country Day School for our after-school program. We're responsible for ensuring that the access to that building and the programming and the things that we do in that facility are accessible. By virtue of our agreement, we've taken on responsibility for all the ADA compliance with the Veterans Home facility with a swimming pool. So there are a number of things. Those are both high priority, again, because of the accessibility. So I hope that gives you a little better understanding of how comprehensive we really are looking at this. It also includes identification of the accessibility of things like garbage containers and receptacles. And we've already, Mr. Gilbert mentioned the fact that we started working on some of those things, and those were one of those things that we've already taken and addressed in the current year programming. So I appreciate the fact that you've brought staff's attention back to that we put too much emphasis on one area. And I hope that this gives you a better understanding that there is a detailed summary spreadsheet with the charts, and it goes into that. And I do think it's important to realize that we're looking at everything the town touches. We've emphasized, because some folks have said, well, a park's not a program. Well, by state law and by case law, access to a park is a program. And those are some things that we're taking to heart, and we have a few areas to work on.
I'd just like to follow up a little bit on what Steve was just talking about. I think one of the reasons for the narrow focus is it is a priority for the town because it's been an identified ADA non-compliant condition of potentially significant risk. And so that was clearly a priority for not only the presentation to highlight what we're doing about it, but for staff to be identifying solutions. It doesn't mean that any of the other content is being ignored by any means. I think they're more, and I think as the presentation dictated, much more kind of traditional fixes that are in place that need to be addressed. This is a unique circumstance that was created by a design that was well-intended and quickly became non-compliant. And it needs, I mean, it has a major impact on an entire neighborhood, where some of these other situations are individual intersections, crosswalks, that type of thing. So it is a unique situation, but it's certainly fair to say that there's 99% of the content that is still there that needs to be addressed and is being addressed.
Fair enough.
Let's see, where are we? We've had comments from anyone, any other council comments about the presentation? I did want to, again, Councilmember Dornbecker, did you have anything? Okay, I wanted to recognize, as I mentioned earlier, the 3 e-comments that were received. One was opposed to the plan by Kimberly Cook. Her 2 listed concerns that we received legal documentation requested that the town, that the town shows the requirement to make these changes to our neighborhood. I think that was addressed tonight with some of the legal definitions that were presented by council in the staff report. And the other point, that all proposed plans for sidewalk neighborhood roadways be reviewed by the fire department for required accessibility before approval to avoid red curbs. And I know that red curb issue relates directly to the Yountville Square adjacent neighborhood based on some earlier public comments. And then both Denise and Paul Hughes who are in attendance and certainly welcome to speak on their own behalf, sent what are categorized as neutral comments about their concerns about if ADA accessible sidewalks are required, considering the aesthetic impact on the community. And that certainly has been addressed to a great degree by staff already, specifically changing other conditions to the neighborhood wouldn't be accepted, like changing roof types that would not match the rest of the neighborhood, that public improvements should be held to the same criteria as private property improvements. That was Denise. And Paul talking about the Justice Department's ADA guidelines for small towns, and that not every park needs to have ADA accessibility. I think also Steve addressed those specific concerns about parks being public programming spaces different than sidewalks and access as it relates to private property and homes. I would certainly invite, if I didn't paraphrase accurately, you're welcome to do that. If any other members of the public would like to comment, now would be the time to do that. Seeing no other public comment, then I'll invite any other comment from the council. I believe the direction that's being requested, this, because I keep getting kicked out, Michelle, from this.
You do? Okay, good to know.
That, and I've written down the circumstances for that.
Are you back in?
Yes.
Okay.
We are being asked to adopt the report tonight. So is there further discussion or action? If there's no further discussion, I understand that there's a motion and a second that's been made. Motion, I believe, I'm waiting to see, I believe it
Do you have a
was
verbal motion, please?
Councilmember
Verbal
Moeller.
motion and a verbal second. I see them on my screen.
I believe
Okay, I'd like to
Councilmember
make a
Moeller made the motion.
If the
and-
mayor would like a motion, I could make a motion.
And before I take the second, let's hear what the motion is.
The motion is to adopt resolution number 15-3285, approval and adoption of the town's updated and self-evaluation and transition plan created by Moore, Icofano, Goldsman, Inc. MIG, whatever that means.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
And seconded, I believe, by
seconded
Councilmember Dornbecker. Please cast your vote. And there we are, unanimous approval again to accept that. Thank you both for such an exhaustive and comprehensive report. The staff didn't really do anything. You guys did the work. Of course, we appreciate the support that we get from our staff on this and every other project. So thank you all very much. I know it's only been a couple years in the making, so.
Yeah.
And our work isn't over. This is just the, like you say, this is the plan to move forward to address these issues, so we will do so. Thank you very much. Let's see. I think we want to try to power through the rest of our items tonight, if we may, given the late hour.
Stop now.
What's,
I don't dare take a 5-minute break because it'll be 15 minutes and we don't have that kind of time. So we're going to move right ahead to our next item, which is considering the adoption of a resolution urging the state to provide new sustainable funding for state and local transportation infrastructure. And I believe, am I just going right into this, or were you going to present?
yes.
Okay. So this was brought to the council's attention at our last meeting. I had been contacted by the League of California Cities to support the governor's proclamation calling for additional transportation and infrastructure funding. We were given a draft resolution for consideration, which is attached, and I don't think we really need to go into too much detail, but basically this is supporting and urging the governor to put forth these recommendations. In particular, there were 7 priorities, as they're listed here in the resolution, for focus on the funding, assuming that's made available for streets and roads. I don't really feel the need to read through the whole thing. If anyone has questions about the language.
Just, Mayor, Council, one thing I want to bring to your attention is that we have a fairly restrictive, the council's adopted in your protocols, a fairly restrictive lobbying and legislative. I will point out that this particular item, because it potentially involves funding that would come back to the town for repair of our streets and roads, does make this an eligible topic for us to potentially. I just want to make you aware that in your legislative matters, so that may be something we want to take a look at in a future council retreat. But this particular item does qualify for us to send a lobbying letter, if you will, on this, because the way the resolution...
Letter of support.
Letter of
for
support.
the governor's actions. So I'm glad you didn't change our ability after I wrote this whole thing.
No, but I want to make sure that you all know that we try to make sure that we don't put you in jeopardy of violating your own council protocols. So you have your policy currently states that unless it directly affects the town
right,
and benefits it, we don't do this kind of stuff. So that's why I wanted to make sure that this particular one is consistent with your council protocols.
Any discussion about the resolution?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I will
Councilmember
make a
Dornbecker?
motion that we approve resolution number 15-3286 urging the state to provide new sustainable funding for state and local transportation infrastructure.
Second.
So, motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, seconded by Vice Mayor Hall. Please vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll move right ahead, and I believe our town clerk has some reports on. First, we're going to do our Zoning and Design Review Board appointments. Again, no, you're going to tell us what we did earlier.
Yes, so the town staff is recruiting for 3 positions on the Zoning and Design Review Board. 2 of those positions are for 3-year terms, and 1 position is to fill the unexpired term of Councilmember Durham. We did recruit for these positions, and at the close of the filing period, we received 4 applications for the 3 positions. They're from Carrie Dorman, Mikkel Tigret, Barbara Allen, and Stephen Miller. And council interviewed the applicants earlier this evening and submitted their vote tallies. And as a result of those votes, well, let me first back up and say, because we have 2 full terms and we have 1 unexpired term to fill, the 2 individuals ranked 1 and 2 will fill the full 3-year term spots, and the 3rd ranked position will fill the unexpired term of 1 year. And with that, the ranking, it's a little unique this time. So we have council ranking Carrie Dorman as the first pick, which will fill one of the full 3-year terms. And then we have a tie between the second ranked position with Mikkel Tigret and Barbara Allen. And so it'll be up to council to determine who should serve on that 3-year term.
So
There's a tie.
we didn't really have this as a ranked voting situation, but could I recommend that we consider if there is a ranked voting tiebreaker between those 2? Is there a way to identify that?
Well, I could further refine the vote and say that there were 3 council members that ranked Mikkel as their second choice. And then, so there were, and then for Barbara Allen, there was 1 council member as a first choice and 1 council member as a second choice. If you want me to further refine that, I can do that.
So 3 second choices and a first and a second choice.
Yes.
So if that was a ranked system, would the first and second outweigh the 3 seconds, or would they still be tied?
Well, Barbara got a first, and the other one didn't, if you're doing ranks.
Well, that's right. And maybe it's not appropriate to.
How would you like to handle this?
Well, I think we could possibly. Just vote for the.
Right. What I would say, the one thing is, you have to remember, you'd have to be consistent, so you'd have to look at 3 votes on each one of them, because if I understand what the town clerk said, she identified 3 seconds, and on the one, she identified 1 first, 1 second, so you would need to bring in a 3rd vote. And then if you looked at that. What was
the next highest vote for Barbara Allen?
There were 2 2s and 1 1. So
those are the 3 votes.
2 1.
So 1 2 2 versus 2 2 2. Is I think what you're saying.
No, it's 3 3 3 2 1 is Mikkel Tigret. 3 3 3 2 1, and then Barbara Allen is 4 3 2 2 1.
So I think it might be more appropriate that we actually just vote specifically.
I would agree, because we did not identify,
I also agree.
the weighting is not a.
Thank you. Thank you.
You could have said that, 4 minutes ago. You're legally required to revote. Okay, then never mind. So first of all, Carrie Dorman has been appointed to one of the full terms.
Well, yes, she's ranked first and will then take one of the full 3-year terms.
Do we have? I don't dare try to do this electronically.
I would prefer to do it manually and all.
Okay, so we just verbally give you first place. Do you want to say Mikkel? How many first place votes for Mikkel?
Or can I make a motion?
You can simply make a motion. We know that Carrie Dorman is going to be the first. Is the first ranked, and will take one of the 3-year terms. Then you need to place Mikkel and Barbara in the 3-year term or the 1-year term.
So I want to make sure, legally, can we just go ahead and make the motion and have that be a determining factor for a tie-breaking vote?
So there's not clear case law on what you have to do in this circumstance, Mr. Mayor, but I would recommend that the most defensible way to do this would be to simply vote now.
As opposed to have a motion before voting.
Oh,
There was going to be a
I'm sorry.
motion that was
To vote, yes.
potentially
I'm
going
sorry.
to say what three.
Yes, no, of course, sorry, you have to have a motion to vote. I was getting back to your comment, the legal requirement of how to deal with this situation where it's unclear who should fill the second spot and who should be ranked number 3. That's what I meant, is that this is the best way to do it, and yes, of course, the motion is
We should vote it out.
Yes,
not
sir.
Motion it out.
motion and vote, yes.
Yeah, it's the same.
The answer is
We're
yes.
going to make a motion that we vote, and then
Yes.
we're going to vote.
Exactly.
Of how we're going to vote.
Yes.
Clear.
I was going to make a motion of who I thought should be
That's what,
number
I know
2.
that, and that's why I was trying to
Okay,
figure out.
very good.
So we can't entertain a motion to determine the top 3. That's what Councilmember Durham was about to do,
Yeah.
which is why I asked, do we need to actually vote for the second and third highest?
Are you trying to bifurcate the vote and just appoint one because she's clearly the first and then?
No, I think
No?
that we've
Okay.
determined that that's not what we should do.
Okay,
We have the top vote getter clear.
yes.
Yes.
The second and third place vote getters are not clear. Do we need to vote separately for the second and third place, or can a motion be presented to rank them second and third?
Yes, the second thing you said, the motion to rank them second and third. I'm sorry if that
So
was
I'll
unclear.
entertain Councilmember Durham's motion.
So I make a motion that we make Barbara Allen the number 2 vote getter and Mikkel the third vote getter.
Second.
Is there any further discussion on that? So, would you like a roll call vote? Okay,
Unless the mayor would, then we certainly can.
I don't know if it's, we'll find out if it's necessary. All in favor of the motion that would list Carrie Dorman number 1, Barbara Allen number 2, and Mikkel Tigres number 3? All in favor,
yes.
say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's what we're going to go with. We have Carrie Dorman number 1, Barbara Allen number 2, so they will be appointed to the full terms, and Mikkel Tigret will be appointed to the partial unexpired term.
Yes, that's correct.
I have a feeling this vote will be in the Yountville Sun, because she's right there writing about it.
With a headshot.
With a headshot.
Okay.
It's 3 years.
The
Full term?
full terms are 3 years. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
And there's the third place is
Is it
1 year
unex-
remaining.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay, so I do want to congratulate Carrie, Barbara, and Mikkel. I also want to thank Stephen Miller, who, all 4 were very strong candidates. Again, the council very much appreciates the fact that we have really strong candidates from which to choose, and certainly encourage Mr. Miller to continue to be involved and look for other opportunities in the future. But we will welcome Carrie, Barbara, and Mikkel. And the next meeting, Michelle, do you happen to have that date?
August 11th.
August 11th? Just to give everybody a heads up on that. Thank you. And thank you again for everybody that was willing to step up and volunteer.
I can't wait for the next one.
That's easy.
Napa
Only
County
easy
Measure
one
8
enough.
Financial
Saving the best
Oversight
for
Committee.
last.
I believe we had a unanimous vote for our reappointment of Michael Bunch.
Yes, you did.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved?
You can use your iPad if
Second.
you'd like. Okay.
Oh,
Motion by Councilmember Dornbecker, seconded by Vice Mayor Hall. And we're going through that motion literally and figuratively right now. Please vote. Unanimously, Mr. Bunch is reappointed, and we thank him very much for his continued service in that capacity. It's going to get even more interesting in the next 2 years as we wind down Measure A. Next up, we have some staff informational reports listed here. Are we going to get those reports, or are they just being presented to us?
They're just informational reports that you've requested on project updates and water conservation, and with that, they'll give them.
We'll be quick, they're verbal reports.
So Hopper Creek is.
Verbal reports with or without PowerPoints?
Without?
Okay, fair enough. Hopper Creek Flood Protection
Are you
Project
asking
update.
for PowerPoints?
No.
Clarify.
I am happy to report that all the permits are in hand for the Hopper Creek project. So the contractor was out noticing residents this early this week. They are getting started, trying to get some of the clearing and grubbing going, so they'll be removing some of the trees and brush that will allow some access to the bigger work of moving some dirt and doing some of the bank stabilization. We are still waiting for PG&E and some of the utilities to give us a relocation plan for Fennell. So that seems to be the next challenge, is actually getting a schedule from them and getting them on board to actually move the utilities there going down Fennell. We have had several questions regarding street closures. Some of the residents were concerned that they would be either required to park outside of their neighborhood for 8 hours or be locked in their neighborhood if they decided not to leave early enough. Neither of those two is true. It's in the bid document that they can have delays of 15 to 30 minutes, but in no case will the neighborhoods be closed. In the case of Heritage Park, the Heritage subdivision, at least one of those streets will be open for access at all times. So in no case will both of those streets ever be closed. We had a question about Heather Lane today. That street will again not be shut down or denied access for any length of time exceeding 15 to 30 minutes. So just to put people's mind at ease on what's going on out there.
And start times?
Start time, 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. 8:30 prep?
8:30, they can get out on the street and start kind of setting up a little bit, but no noise, so you shouldn't hear backup alarm. You shouldn't hear anything other than people talking and guys setting up the flags and traffic control devices. So if that starts occurring earlier than that, then please let us know, and we'll make sure that we talk to them. Some of that did happen with PG&E earlier last week and the week before. We adjusted their encroachment permit and made sure that they were aware of the terms of the permit, and as a result, they're now going from 9 till 3 to 6, somewhere in that neighborhood. So continue to let us know what's going on, and we'll adjust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for being responsive to that. I know there were some neighbors concerned in my neighborhood in particular that 7:30 was 7:15, and so one morning was a little premature.
A little bit early.
Yeah.
Anywhere, but especially in our neighborhood.
Yes. Water conservation update.
Water conservation update. Well, I'm happy to announce that we saved 42% in the month of July. So I want to put that in a little perspective. Not since 1995 have we seen that kind of water usage. So that predates the Bardessono Hotel, Hotel Yountville, Bellagio. I mean, it's an amazing statistic to think that we're saving that much water, and we've added those kinds of rooms and that kind of capacity. So congratulations to all the people in this town who have worked really hard to make sure that they're following the rules and trying to be as conserve as much as they can wherever they can. So it's working well. At this point, we are now at 20.30%. So we have reached our goal, and we're going to continue to kind of make that number a bit stronger. But it's nice to see that we're really kind of hitting that mark. You can tell because a lot of the lawns are getting a bit more brown, and but it's working. We're actually saving water, and it's important. I mean, you see what's going on around here, and it makes a big difference for us. So thanks very much.
One quick question. Can you break that down between residential and business?
Yeah, I have a breakdown, but the numbers weren't great right now. But it looks to me like I was looking at it earlier, and we just got the raw data yesterday, and so to break it down, it looks like commercial was about 56%.
Down?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, that's what that number didn't seem right to me either, so that's why I was reluctant to talk about it. But the number is what it is. I mean, they know how much we used in July of 2013 and how much we used this month, and it was down 56%. So
yeah, but there was a switch in the billing. We were monthly, then we went to 2 months. Did that get reflected in the?
That's why I said we're still trying to play with it, but it's a big number. It's a big number.
I mean, if it wasn't accounted for, it would be like 25%, which makes more sense.
It does make more sense.
Well, let's let staff look at the numbers instead of us guessing at what the numbers are.
They have a month-by-month accounting, so
And
I do want to look at the numbers.
I do think that's a fair consideration because the state is using the 2013 baseline and we only converted to monthly. So we need to do some reconciliation. The good news is we are accurate at year-end totals, but I do think you're seeing some business lawns. I mean, the Vintage Villaggio V Marketplace have done a really good job with even some signage that indicates that they're letting certain parts of the lawn go dormant and focus on others. And certainly the 2-day-a-week residential lawn watering is starting to really show. And it's also, but it's also showing in a lot of ways. We've had very good cash for grass participation, and a lot of people are realizing that the landscaping can work and survive on 2-day-a-week, and they'll save money long-term. So some people may not want to change their behavior, because when we reduce water usage, we're actually saving money.
I will say that we also have fixed a few large leaks, some on the commercial side, some on the residential side. So we're continuing to identify some of those leaks, both through our customer and through our own data. And as we continue to kind of get after those leaks, that number is just going to continue to get better. So it is encouraging. I want to say, thanks to everybody who's helping, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Community Center Repair Project Update.
So really quickly, we are progressing. So the deadline for the community hall is this Friday, and so you'll see a lot of action going on right now. We have a quinceanera in that space this Saturday, so they definitely have a deadline. And then the outside of the facility, they'll finish up the siding and the plaza tiles over the next week and a half, and everything will be done for our August 21st event.
One quick question.
On budget.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Councilmember Durham?
I'm sorry, I'm very excited, but I know it's at the end, but I want to ask, sorry, real quick, because people have been asking, the sidewalk in front of Edward James Plaza, I thought, is that completed now? I thought there was no construction in...
Or today, or...
Yeah.
So is it the construction on Washington Street,
yes, sir,
was finished before the moratorium, but that's on the private property side.
Okay.
So that was allowed to continue.
All right, very good. Thank you.
It has been poured. They anticipate opening. I think the town manager has some information on.
Well, I think we'll see. I think it'll be finished by the end of the week. They've got the ends, but that's a good clarification that our moratorium is the street, not necessarily the sidewalk, and that's why they did get there. That's why there was that gap between the curbs and gutters first.
Okay.
And then they waited until after Bastille Day to do the damage on the sidewalk and re-pour that, so.
Thank you.
And I will also point out that that sidewalk is a condition, and again, a good example of where we've applied our ability to ensure that it is an ADA accessible sidewalk, and you'll really notice that when you see it.
All right, thank you. Only the required meeting reports and comments at this point. Very quickly, Napa County Flood Control. There was a ceremony this morning officially opening the Napa Flood Control dry bypass channel with numerous dignitaries from Congressman Thompson, Senator Wolk, Assemblymember Dodd, and many, many others were in attendance. So that's an exciting new opportunity to have open space and park use down there in that dry bypass. NCTPA, no report at this time. Do we have...
Groundbreaking.
Yeah, Pine Trail.
Thursday.
That's coming up. Okay.
Well, I thought you were on NCTPA.
Yeah, well, I was just reporting back on the old stuff.
Sorry,
But yes,
sorry.
there is,
Brian, I thought you
sure,
were
there's
moving on.
groundbreaking, is that this Thursday?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay, I don't remember where I'm supposed to be.
The
Redwood?
Redwood Park and Ride at Redwood and Solano Avenue in Napa.
And if you're interested, we can form a carpool, or probably more
Or bicycle
efficiently,
down
we
there.
should bike, but I will be willing to drive those of you that are interested to go.
Thank you. Upper Valley Waste Management, is there anything we need to know right now?
No.
All right, thank you. Very quickly on the Ag Protection Advisory Committee, we did take 2 actions, which was 2 more than usual for us. We passed a motion that I presented that requires all wineries to provide annual self-certification documents confirming that they are in compliance with all of their use permit conditions. And there is going to be a structure in place that if they're out of compliance, they have a very finite amount of time to get into compliance or risk fines and potential heavier penalties.
Did you put those in place?
The specific penalties? No.
Oh.
No. Also, we determined that variances to conditions, especially setbacks, should not be used by the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors as a primary tool to allow winery developments to comply on sites that are not sufficiently suited for their impacts. Because a growing concern was that variances were being used as a tool just to make things kind of shoehorn into place in some parcels. So those were two actions that committee took. We still have 2 meetings left before our formal presentation to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Councilmember Dornbecker, you want to report on the North Bay Division meeting?
Yes, I attended the North Bay Division of the League of California Cities, at which time we installed our new officers for 2015-2016. Leon Garcia is mayor of American Canyon, is the president of the division. Denise Athos of Novato is first vice president, and Mike Healy of Petaluma is the second vice president. And we had a presentation on aging in place using the village model, and it's something that is being talked about now in the Napa Valley as well.
Thank you.
And WIC?
Do you have a WIC report?
I do.
All right.
All right, so I attended the Watershed Information and Conservation Council. One of the things we're reporting on is that that's a new name. We had a name change, and it was approved by the Board of Supervisors. So that is the new name, Watershed Information and Conservation Council, so it didn't change our...
Still WIC.
And also, we found out that the state just passed a law that has now made well logs are no longer proprietary, and they are public documents, because they want to be able to measure the water table throughout the valley, throughout the state. But anyway, that's something that impacts the valley. And I guess the California Water Commission is meeting August 24th and 25th in Sacramento, a seminar on water.
Thank you. One more meeting to report on from me. I attended yesterday the Local Agency Formation Commission, or LAFCO, board meeting. In particular, I was there because they were discussing their backlog work plan for municipal service delivery reviews and spheres of influence. I found it interesting that commissioners, also supervisors, Wagon Connect and Dillon, expressed a concern that nothing get in the way of the LAFCO review of the Napa Pipe. That was their sole priority. Let's see, Executive Director Freeman, who was, earlier that meeting was made the permanent executive officer. He had been the interim officer, but he explained that there'd be no concern about moving forward with Napa Pipe and having RFPs go out to consultants for the Up Valley reviews. So after I made a statement that, among other things, I expressed a concern that we were 9 years and counting behind our review, and that it was negatively impacting our ability to have our general plan updates in a timely manner, that there was a county representative, Jennifer Phillips, that was there, who also was pushing for Napa Pipe as the sole priority for the commission, but Commissioner Kelly eventually moved for approval of the staff recommendation with a new tentative work plan, and a subcommittee of Commissioner Dillon and Commissioner Pitts from St. Helena would be put together to review the RFPs as they come in. As presented, we would, all three Up Valley communities would be receiving reviews within, I think, September would be the start time for those reviews. So that's kudos to Executive Officer Freeman for coming up with a new process, using some personnel funds that they have saved by not replacing his analyst position in order to go out and get some consultants that can go ahead and put our reviews as a top priority. We're kind of leapfrogging some of the special districts that don't really have any action going on. So I want to thank him on our behalf. And then there's potentially a whole new process they're going to use going forward if this proves to be effective, that we can count on having much more regularly and as required by their own bylaws, regular reviews. So that was good news for us in St. Helena and for Calistoga. So any other meetings before we go on to announcements? I believe the Vice Mayor has some announcements.
I do. So just to give a recap of the dates for everyone here, September the 6th is the Focus Barbecue. I've seen that it's going to be a wonderful experience for all, so please be prepared for that. And if you haven't volunteered yet or you've got something you want to participate in, let us know or let Focus know. September 11th is the Kiwanis Wormburner Golf Tournament at the Vintners Club, and September 21st is the Pathway Home Golf Tournament at Eagle Vines. Get your foursomes quickly. Thank you.
And I believe that Pathway Home Tournament is getting at or near sellout, so that you do need to act quickly, yes. Other announcements? I believe you might have something about our big party.
I did want to also mention, though, that the Go Green team met, and prior to our meeting last week, we had a tour of the wastewater treatment plant, and it was 150 degrees. But we, Billy and several of the members soldiered on, and we did that. Our next meeting is coming up the last Thursday of August, and we're going to have a tour of Bardessono as a LEED platinum building. So we're working diligently towards that. Yes. August 21st, our big birthday bash is coming up. The last thing I heard was that we had already gotten about 150 RSVPs from people. So that's a very good thing, and the invitations are out. Everybody here received theirs, right?
Yes.
Invitation to the, okay.
I got my secret.
Hopefully. And I assume that we should RSVP as well.
Yes, please.
And so, just to make sure, in case somebody hasn't, because everyone should have received their invitations, but I believe we're emailing to Stacy, snunley@wyville.com.
Yes.
And
Correct.
just a reminder that people do need to RSVP. It's free to all residents.
Yes.
And I believe we've called it local VIPs or something like that. But everyone does need to register so we can have a proper head count and have everybody on a list. So if you don't RSVP, there may be a problem.
So we also have information going out in the Yountville Sun on Nextdoor.com, just in the event that people misplaced, didn't see, didn't get their invitation. But they did go out to all of our addresses that we have on file here. We did get quite a few back that said vacant from the post office, but I'm making sure that we get the word out across Yountville. So, and remind your neighbors and friends, to RSVP. So we're at the end of today about almost 200. So.
Okay. And I think what's important to realize is, Mayor, what you indicated is people do need to RSV in part because we do have capacity limits for the event, and it is a reservation required, as you said.
And if people are not full-time residents, they still are.
Absolutely.
They still are invited to attend.
Yes, and the Veterans Home, they're handling their own registration through their Member Services Department, and they'll also be providing transportation for their members. So if you live at the Veterans Home, you need to register through your Member Services Department.
Do we have a plan to bring on a second trolley, or can we consider that if we
already
have that in place?
in way?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And are we going to contact the gentleman up there with the drone and the?
Well, you weren't supposed to talk about that, but
I wasn't?
no.
No one's watching. It's late. We'll talk about that tomorrow. We can talk about that tomorrow.
Certain
in our
special
meeting.
Okay.
activities are
was that?
part of.
We're meeting tomorrow,
Party.
and we'll discuss those
We'll
top
discuss it
secret
then.
items then.
We'll discuss.
Scratch
I
that,
didn't think
TJ.
that was one of the big treats.
Well, maybe I'm just going to disclose some of the secrets you've been
You
putting together.
better not.
It's obviously getting close to 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Any other announcements? I know we're not meeting again this month, so anything that gets us through the Labor Day weekend, any other announcements other than the Focus Labor Day weekend barbecue? Seeing no other.
Will just remind you that we have a calendar quirk. You will actually be meeting before Labor Day, so you will get to remind everybody about the Focus Labor Day barbecue.
We do meet on September 1.
That is correct. We have a very unique, and we were all commenting on that earlier at staff meeting about doesn't seem right having the meeting for September before Labor Day, but it will occur.
I do want to just recognize on behalf of the council and staff a slightly belated birthday to our town manager, Mr. Rogers, who just turned another year older on Monday.
This is true.
Yesterday.
This is true.
Culminating his 10-day road trip. And welcome back.
Thank you.
I know this staff is going to hopefully take some opportunity this month without some of our regularly scheduled meetings to take a little well-deserved break. So hopefully that can happen. Seeing no closed session on our agenda tonight, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to our next meeting, which is scheduled for 6 p.m. on September 1st.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn to our next meeting on September the 1st at 6 p.m.
Motion by Councilmember Moeller, seconded by
Second.
Vice Mayor. All in favor?
Aye.
Another unanimous vote. We're all but one tonight. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Lights on. Okay, lights.